Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 39th episode of the Exploring Antinatalism Podcast, a podcast all about the subject of antinatalism created by anti-natalists. My name is Amanda Oldphan Sukenick, also known as Foreverwolffilms on YouTube, and today I'm speaking with the winner of the new Anti-natalist division of the 2020 6th Annual Why Are You an Anti-natalist Contest, and author of the novella Last Call for Heroes, Connor Garcia. Welcome to the Exploring Antinatalism Podcast, Connor.
Oh, it's great to be here. What an honor.
It's an honor to have you. Thank you for coming on. It's been a long time coming. So, Connor, just to give our audience a little bit of extra context for those that might not be as familiar with you, you are, of course, as I said, the winner of the 6th Annual Why Are You an Antinatalist Contest, the 2020 edition. You were the winner of the new Anti-natalist category, which is really the category that the whole contest is meant for, a chance for new anti-natalists to make their introduction to the rest of the antinatalist community and beyond, as well as win some fabulous prizes for their efforts. And that is how I originally met you last year, and you've been impressing me with your work ever since. I want to talk all about your winning contest entry in a bit, as well as the book, of course, Last Call for Heroes. But first, I'd like to ask you just a little bit about your general anti-natalist views and a little bit about your background as a writer. So in your own words, Connor, who is Connor Garcia?
Well, I'm a balding, overweight, middle-aged drunk. In my early 40s. I done a lot of various things in my life, traveled a lot, lived a lot of different places. I owned a business or two. I was an arborist for a long period of time, doing tree removal, tree trimming, planting, that type of thing. I owned a landscape install business. I owned my own furniture making business and did most of the furniture in my house, welding and fabrication, this type of thing. So all kinds of stuff. It's, just probably too much to sum up. And I've been, not very good at any of it, but had a wonderful time. So done various careers. So that, and I'm an anti-natalist, recent anti-natalist, and I have a lot of other views and opinions, like other folks. So I guess that's who I am.
Excellent. Well, yeah, no, I've gotten that sense about you, that you're quite an accomplished person that's tried their hand at a lot of things. And so, Connor, why are you an antinatalist?
I think it's simply recognizing the fact that bringing people into existence without their consent is bad. And it's such an interesting question because why are you an antinatalist? Because it sort of has to do with the majority, right?
Yeah.
Like, imagine if, there we were in like the 1700s America or something, and then, we had a anti-slave podcast or something, and say, why are you anti-slavery? It's just so interesting. And, it's because that might be a podcast that could happen at that time, of course, technology notwithstanding. Yeah. But really, why isn't everybody an anti-natalist? And to me, it's just the time we're in. It's a kind of an interesting question.
It's an interesting answer. Yeah, no, I like that. I like that answer. I agree with you. I'm curious, how do you define antinatalism?
Well, I'm no philosopher, and I'm not even keen on philosophy. So the philosophical answers, I think, kind of complicate and don't really hit the nail on the head. And I probably had to answer this question every time differently. How do I define antinatalism? It's, I guess that's a challenge. So my definition would be antinatalism is the knowledge that it's wrong to bring sentient beings into existence.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent definition, quite frankly. In one of the interviews that you did after the release of the book last year, you mentioned that you didn't like the fact that social movement had been added into the Wikipedia definition of antinatalism. Now, I was wondering if you could expand a little on your feelings about this?
Not all anti-natalists have to be part of the social movement. So if you say that social movement is part of anti-natalism, then does that exclude those who are anti-natalists, but they don't want to be involved in some type of social movement? I just think the two things should be separated. Now, I'm in favor of anti-natalism as an idea and knowledge, and I'm also in favor of the social movement, but I think it's a conflation, which is why I don't like that definition. The social movement should be something else. So, you know, with women's right to vote, you had the social movement, suffragettes, and then you might have had a bunch of others who just think, yeah, women should have the right to vote, but they don't do anything about it. Well, they were, for equality. They just weren't part of the social movement.
Yeah, no, actually, I agree with you. I obviously I am in favor of it being a social movement, but I was extremely surprised to see that added in all of a sudden. It hadn't been there for years and years, and then all of a sudden, it was there. So I don't blame you and others for being a little upset that was an addition made. I kind of hope that it we either have to agree on a definition as a community or something if we're going to change that long-standing definition that's been up there, or just kind of leave it alone. That's kind of my feelings about it.
Wiki definition sucks.
It does.
It's real shitty. And I think in your podcast with David Benatar, he pointed out a number of problems that he had with it.
Yes.
So in my opinion, somebody should friggin' ask David Benatar, hey, what's the definition of anti-natalism? And they should ask it in some type of a formal way, like, through an email request or something. And then that's what should be in the damn, something like that should go in the wiki page. But, anti-natalists are also agreeable that if Benatar produces the definition, they'll all say, oh, yeah, that's it. He really got it, right? Right.
I did try to get everybody involved at one point in creating a new definition, because antinatalism to this day is still not in the Oxford English Dictionary or any other official dictionary, in English at least. And unfortunately I couldn't really get people involved in that kind of project, but I agree. I mean, it's definitely something that should happen. There should be a definitive definition of it. But yes, to get everybody to agree, that is a bit of a tall order. So what do you feel to be the strongest arguments for antinatalism?
I think consent is the strongest. And I don't know. I don't really get David Benatar, and I've watched a ton of videos of people trying to explain the asymmetry, and I just don't think I'm smart enough to get it. And then I think, well, there are some other people who are even dumber than me. So the strong argument is consent. I mean, I think in Mendham sums it up nicely. If you have somebody who becomes sentient, and that sentient person asks their parents or their creator, why the fuck did you bring me into existence? I really don't want to be here. I never agreed to that. What's your justification? And they don't have a justification. Then by implication, later on, probably nobody should be doing that. So some of the people you create don't like it. So you should stop it. Yeah.
That's pretty simple.
To me, pretty simple.
Yeah. Well, I think the asymmetry is a really great piece of logic. At the same time, that is sort of my issue with it, is that, like, why give people a Rubik's Cube, in order to understand something that's really so simple, and that can be, and so, yeah, that is the weakness of it, I think, is that it's great for philosophy professors and people that are literate in philosophy, but it's not great for the regular people a lot of the time. So yeah, I agree with you on that.
And I hate philosophy. I'm not a fan of philosophy.
Yeah.
I just don't get it. I mean, what kind of a freaking truth engine, when everybody's using the same damn engine, they put in the same stuff and they get different answers? That sounds like a pretty shitty truth engine to me. So even if it was a good truth engine, and they had good truth engines in philosophy, well, it's garbage in, garbage out. So they don't agree on shit. And then you have these people saying, I'm a great philosopher theologian. Well, if you're half a fucking philosopher, you shouldn't be buying into religion and fairy tales and bullshit either. So a lot of that is just garbage, and it's discredited. But we have our own, important roots tracing back to Aristotle and Socrates, who are also wrong about a ton of shit. Yeah. And I'm with Mendham. Hey, let's just talk about the ideas instead of name dropping everybody.
Right.
Okay. Right. So yeah, I'm not really a fan of the philosophy.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
Or the philosophers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, what are your strongest antinatal influences? Do you read many antinatalist books, watch antinatalist videos, and how do you most engage with the antinatalist community?
My anti-natalism was generated within my own, in an intellectual vacuum in my own brain.
Yeah.
And it hasn't changed much since that generation, though I've gotten a lot of other interesting opinions and stuff from watching anti-natalist videos. So I'd say I liked Benatar, and I think he absolutely destroyed Sam Harris on his podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he frickin' wrecked Jordan Peterson, who couldn't lick Benatar's boot in terms of intellectual capacity. So though I'll have to admit, and I own Benatar's book, I skimmed it. I didn't actually give it a thorough reading. And I bet there's a bunch of anti-natalists who name drop Benatar and have him on their shelf who've skimmed it as well.
Sure.
It doesn't exactly make for great reading. In my opinion, a tremendously important book. Well, neither does the encyclopedia or the dictionary. They're tremendously important books, but they don't make all that great reading. So, yeah, Benatar, of course, is a huge influence, but his YouTube videos, the things he's said and interviews on podcasts are much more influential to me than his book.
Yeah.
And then In Mendham, absolutely. In Mendham's a huge freaking influence for me. Wonderful ideas. He's such a wonderful, charismatic speaker. I think he's absolutely great.
Absolutely.
And he doesn't pull any punches, which I love. And he speaks straight truth, which is against society in many cases, which I love. And I don't agree with everything In Mendham says. I'm not an In Mendham sycophant, but huge influence on me, huge positive influence on me.
Yes, same.
And how do I engage with the AN community most? Well, I'm a crusty old fuck, and I'm a staunch AN, and I've got libertarian leanings, and so I don't engage much with the AN community.
That's okay.
I'd like to a little bit, in some art, in podcasts, interviews, YouTube comments, which of course is our highest forum, right? The YouTube comments.
Right. The upper echelon of communication right there. Mm-hmm.
So these are the small ways which I engage the AN community. And then I try to support contests or,
yes, you do.
YouTubers or anybody important. I try to support, purchase work, etc. Give good feedback when I have it, and shut my mouth if I don't have anything nice to say. So that's mostly how I try to promote the community.
That's great. No, I think you've made a very important contribution to the community, quite frankly. So, but yeah, as you know, Connor, anti-procreation is sometimes broken up into 4 general schools of thought: anti-natalism, effelism, vehement, and child-free. Can you share with me some of your thoughts about each?
I think they're all pretty good. Yeah. Effelism is kind of the tricky one because we're so far away from any possible type of a solution. Yeah. Because I don't think we should go about, even if we say, if the red button existed, I still don't. There's a lot of strange implications people draw from that. Like, oh, you want to kill everybody, or oh, you want to, if there was a big enough nuclear bomb, you'd set it off. Any of these things would require some thought.
Of course, yes.
And so effelism is so tricky because, what the hell you can believe that pushing the red button would be the right thing to do, but you should be damn careful about what implications come next.
Of course, absolutely.
And vehement, absolutely vehement whole, in my opinion, is they hold too much stock in the wonder and sanctity of nature.
Yeah.
Well, nature's no good, great freaking thing either. I mean, and besides that, 99% of the species had gone extinct by the time humans made it on the geological scene. So what's so great about keeping nature around? Yeah. I used to think, hey, the death of the dodo bird was something real bad, but probably wasn't so bad for the dodo bird. No more dodo birds getting killed.
Right.
Humans don't like the death of the dodo bird. Right. So, but vehement is way more morally aligned, and vehement, I think, is on our team And child-free, I'd say, is on our team too. So I don't care. I don't really care what somebody's reasons are for not procreating or bringing in sentient beings into existence, as long as they're going about it and appear to be doing so in the future and influencing other people to go about it as well. So I think they're all great. But I'd like a Venn diagram of antinatalism, ephilism, vehement, and child-free, and to see, okay, who's in these various areas of the Venn diagram. Because there are some anti-natalists who are anti-natalists for what I consider real shitty reasons, but we end up sort of in the same big tent, right? Euthanasia would be probably the most frickin' abhorrent of those to me. You know, some euthanasia. No, I'm thinking eugenics. Sorry.
Oh, eugenics. Yes.
Eugenics.
Really?
Eugenics. No,
Yeah.
eugenics. I used the wrong word. Eugenics.
That's okay.
So,
That's okay.
So these are the people who say a bunch of these races or these people shouldn't procreate.
Oh, of course. Yes. Yes.
And I think that's true. It's true. Those races and those people shouldn't procreate, but the rest of us shouldn't either.
Right.
Nobody should.
Antinatalism
So
should be for everybody. Right. It's not.
Antinatalism should be for everybody. So the eugenicists are the worst part, and I guess they aren't totally antinatalism if you define antinatalism as the knowledge that it's wrong to bring sentient creatures into existence. But they're sort of somewhere along that Venn diagram, right? I mean, neither are child-free. If you say, I'm not going to have children because I like to go surfing, you know, all right, you're sort of part of the movement, but you've done it for a trivial reason, and some people do it for shitty reasons, like the religious. We can't, there's some possibility that the child will go to hell. Therefore, we can't have the child because you know, just from statistics, we're condemning them to hell. What a shitty reason to be an antinatalist, but, you know, they're sort of technically on our team. You know, they could have some effect on reducing population or speeding up the Great Decline, as I call it, which is a curve on population where we start to go down in terms of our total population count instead of up. But I don't know much about all the categories. I'd love it if somebody would do a YouTube video of a Venn diagram of all the different categories and explain the different categories. I think that'd be tremendously educational, and I don't know if there's one out.
That's a great idea. I mean, there's, you know, Masahiro Morioka recently did like a sort of wrote a paper about the categories of antinatalism, but it doesn't include everything. Doesn't include ephilism. He took ephilism out. And there's been some attempt to do that at various times, but not enough. And I agree that would be amazing. I mean, I think the bottom line is this idea does appeal to an unbelievably wide spectrum of people, coming from all different kinds of perspectives. And that's a great thing. And it's also a messy thing. And sometimes, but like you're saying, it can come from a really bad place. So I think that would be a great project for somebody to take up. I'd really love to see somebody do that.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah. How does your antinatalism intersect with other social and ethical issues, such as atheism, veganism, and the right to die?
That is such a good question. I think one can be antinatalist without being atheist, a vegan, or in favor of the right to die. So I don't think in particular you have to necessarily hold all those views, but I think they make pretty good bedfellows. So I'm an atheist. I'm not quite vegan, though. I've improved enormously, and I'm pushing. I'm doing the very best I can, or that probably isn't true. I'm trying, and the right to die, I think, is tricky, but I'm fully in favor of the right to die. I mean, I think it's really sick we bring people into existence and then you don't have the right to escape. I mean, what kind of weird societal slavery is that? So has slavery really been abolished if you got to be a wage slave, or you're slave to your own body, or you're slave to the medical community, keeping you alive on machines and, violating your consent, violating your volition. Exactly. Why? Because that's where the money is. That's sort of our religious culture. I mean, lots of nasty stuff done in the name of religion, and that's one of them. Forcing people to live against their will. Absolutely. So yeah, I'm in favor of the right to die. Yes, I'm in favor of atheism and veganism as well. Good things.
Excellent. No, thank you. I'm asking you a question that Joy asked you in her interview with you back when the the book first came out. When you became an antinatalist, did it change your a lot of positions that you had previously had? Did it change other things in your general worldview?
Yeah, I'm an arborist, and I'd say I'm also sort of I put the amateur and amateur naturalist. And I've done just a ton of backpacking, hiking, climbing in the American West, and I guess all across the United States and Alaska. And I have such a veneration for nature. And when I became an antinatalist, and later when I eventually became an ethalist, I realized it's not such a great, it isn't deserving of respect or veneration.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of coincidentally beautiful, and it has this amazing effect on inducing awe.
Yes.
And making me feel insignificant in the most significant way. And I am absolutely in love with nature, but I no longer venerate it. And like a reintroduction of wolves, I say no.
Yeah.
That's a human instinct. We want wolves so we can study wolves and pick them apart and radio collar them, and examine their shit. And we want wolves so the tourists can see something pretty. But there's nothing about the reintroduction of wolves that's for the wolves.
Exactly.
And realizing that, I'm like, nah, I'm anti-reintroduction of any species, and the recreation of woolly mammoths. Well, leave the fucking things alone, right? I mean, we hunted them into extinction. Haven't we savaged those species enough? Leave them the fuck alone. Yeah. So I'm not in favor of any of that. So my thoughts on nature have changed enormously, and I don't think it's any waste or any horrible thing if some species go extinct. And I think it's a lie. Mostly it's been a lie, which I started to realize. And the lie is that there are these keystone species. And if one of those keystone species becomes, God, if we lose bumblebees, that could lead to the decline of the entire fucking biome.
Yeah.
And that isn't true. It's just what a certain set of environmentalists want to lie about to trump up their cause. So no, the keystone species. Hell, we hunted beavers practically to extinction, and that didn't completely ruin the watershed. I mean, new species thrive, right? So yeah, bumblebees. A lot of other species go into extinction too if we took out bumblebees, but fine, there are crops that don't need bumblebees as a pollinator. And hell, you had incidents like Chicxulub, which was the extinction of the dinosaurs. Big asteroid comes down and knocks out 90% of the species. Oh yeah, it just makes it creates ecological niches for other living beings to fill.
Yeah.
If we extinct mice, then ants will still fill some of that ecological niche, right?
Yep.
There'll be something else, or things will evolve to fill that ecological niche. So that's the big thing that changed in my worldview. And yeah, the celebration of birthdays. I no longer, I really, I always hated birthdays, but after, becoming an anti-natalist, I'm like, this is really some stupid shit, right? Is a birthday celebration part of anti-natalist propaganda? And also, isn't it the people who celebrate birthdays? It's always some overzealous aunt or something who says, "Oh, you're having a birthday, Connor. We got to do a big thing. We got to, it's never for the fucking person who's having a birthday.
Right.
It's always somebody else who likes birthdays. And surprise parties? What a shitty thing that is, Hey, oh, great. I'm gonna go home and watch, season whatever of Game of Thrones and have a beer. Surprise! Here's a fucking party. Oh, great. Yeah. I'm so surprised, and this is a great, spoiled all my plan. When are surprises good?
Right.
I personally prefer a little bit of planning. So yeah, it's changed all sorts of crap in my worldview. And I think it will continue to start to change things in my worldview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can say the same for myself, and I've heard that from many, many, many people, that it really is sort of this giant mind fuck that just completely, changes everything, changes a lot of things. So was that a difficult experience for you, how much it's kind of changed your worldview around?
No, I think I've always kind of had an adaptable mind and always enjoyed having my worldview challenged or having to change or having to remeld my mind doing some of that stuff. So it's been absolutely delightful to have to change all these positions.
I'm glad to hear that then. Yeah.
Rethink things and trace things through. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it was, for me, it was uncomfortable at first, but then it was sort of a relief, you know, because you're just living with a lot less delusion, which is great in the end.
Oh yeah, and I don't really fear or loathe death anymore, and I have a lot less pressure and ambition to do something special because you know, I just don't think it's really possible to do much that's special. You know, a smaller fucking iPhone. That's what Mendham always talks about. You know, a better set of fingernail clippers. I mean, well, examples like, it's, you know, there's only so much you can aspire to.
That's true. That's true. Well, regardless, though, I think you have done some very special things. Not least of which is your book. How long have you been a writer?
The book was under construction when I submitted to your contest last year, but I think what I sent you might have been the first semi-published work or the only thing. So I just got on the scene, just started. So two years ago. Yeah.
So you started writing two years ago, and Last Call for Heroes is your first book.
Last Call for Heroes is my first book. Yes, that's right.
Amazing.
So I've never written anything before. Just started writing. I mean, I've written stuff for school, and you know.
Yeah.
I guess I've written a short story or a funny story or this in an email or two to friends and family, but now this is the first time I've written something. So.
But for you, anti-natalism became this like huge source of artistic inspiration. Am I correct? Yeah.
Anti-natalism for those of us who are persecuted, you know, anti-natalists. It sucks. Nobody gets me. I'm totally and all that's true, and all that does suck. But you got to admit, it's a great time for anti-natalist art because
absolutely.
You're treading into snow nobody else has stepped in. You aren't skiing down a slope every other fucker has gone through. It's deep powder everywhere you look, and it's your option to make good or shitty anti-natalist art and ruin the damn slope or tread the first tracks. I mean, what a rich set of ideas for artistic media. It's a great time to do art in it. I mean, the allegory is when Trump was elected president for comedians. Fucking great time to be a comedian.
Yeah, it's true. Very, very true. It's very true. So, well, I love hearing you say that because I of course absolutely agree. And hey, there's not many slopes like that left, you know, in a world where it's all been done, you know. Yeah. Not anti-natalism, very, very little. So, you know, but you know, it's increasing. And it's amazing. I'm glad there are more people like you that are seeing that way. I know that you're of course very influenced by the sci-fi genre. What have been your biggest sci-fi influences?
I don't really like sci-fi.
Okay, my fault.
No, which is a really bizarre thing because I wrote a sci-fi book. So it's bizarre that I don't. I mean, I prefer fantasy, so I read a shit ton of lowbrow, and I'll read crappy self-published authors like myself in the fantasy genre. But sci-fi, I don't know. I guess I've watched a lot of movies, and then my brother was really into sci-fi growing up, so he had I don't know, about 200 or 300 sci-fi books, which I read. So I've read most of Heinlein, Asimov, who was Fahrenheit 450, Bradbury. I've read Ben Bova, a lot of the, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Stanislaw Lem, I think he did a book called Solaris that was pretty good. I don't know. I'll occasionally read some stuff. For modern stuff, I guess I've read Scalzi. John Scalzi is a pretty damn good science fiction writer, and a few post-apocalyptic books, but I haven't read a ton of sci-fi. And I guess you don't want to bring your work home. So when I was working as an astronomer, sci-fi was the last shit I wanted to read.
Yeah, I can understand that.
I dealt with plenty of that shit at work. This is the last crap I want to read.
Yeah.
Stuff about stars and solar systems and that shit. Oh my God.
I can understand that.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, I hope I'm not, argumentative and a horrible interviewee.
Oh, of course not.
No.
No. I feel sort of the same way. I've never been a big fan of the sci-fi genre, but I love it mixed with other things. Like if there's sort of like a flavor of sci-fi in there, mixed with some other genre that's like the more dominant genre, then I love it. But yeah, I'm a little selective about that.
Oh my God, the genre bending and mixing up the genres, I think is great. I mean, have you seen Firefly, where it's like
I have.
A Western mixed with sci-fi? Oh my God,
that was
incredible.
Great.
Absolutely great. Yeah, I like the genre mixes too.
Yeah, I think that's to me that's where it's best applied, the sci-fi genres in a mix. As I'm sure you know, antinatalist fiction is quite rare, though not unheard of. There have been a few examples that I do know exist prior to Last Call for Heroes. The first one being a book by Julio Cabrera in collaboration with Thiago de Santi. I can't say the original Portuguese name, but it translates to "Because I Love You, You Were Not Born." And from what I understand, this is a novel. And then there's another quite obscure but very interesting example, a little-known book called Among Nightingales by Frankly Scott, which is actually the pen name of the YouTuber Conference Report, who some of you might remember as a long-standing opponent of amendum years ago. And that's a very rare book now. There's a few other examples, but I guess those are the most well-known. Have you read or do you know any of those or other works of antinatalist fiction?
I'm familiar with Cabrera's book, and I think Thiago was one of his students, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I do not own that book. I would love to get my hands on.
Me too.
I would love to get my hands on an English translation, and I think there may be an English translation.
I think there is. I'm not sure though, but yes, I'd love to get a hold of that one. I really would.
So that may be somewhat of a labor for me to go back and find that. I'd love to find that. And I was not familiar with Among Nightingales. And I kind of had the thought or misconception that I was one of the first anti-natalist fiction, or though it was kind of a more narrow category, like the first speculative fiction or science fiction, where I'm writing a book that sort of tells a story about an image of what might happen to society when anti-natalism occurs. Though I don't know, Among Nightingales may also be along those lines.
It is actually Among Nightingales is sort of about like a world in decline, and like the anti-natalists have already won, so it's similar. But again,
that's great.
Very, very obscure. It was actually printed. I mean, there was a very limited print run of it, and I never ended up getting a copy. I'd love to have a copy. But yeah, I mean, you're certainly one of the first. Perhaps not the first, but yeah, definitely one of the first.
And for me, it doesn't matter. I don't feel like I need to be the first. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't.
I actually think Last Call for Heroes, I mean, among those examples, it's probably the most well known at this point. I mean, the Julio Cabrera book, yes, it's a piece of Julio Cabrera, but it's because of the language barrier and everything. I mean, it's not as consumed as Last Call for Heroes, so that's definitely something.
Yeah, Last Call for Heroes has been so enormously successful. I've sold dozens of copies. I mean, royalties number in the tens of dollars.
Amazing.
I mean, it's just been amazing. It's just been amazing for work put in. I'm probably, here after this podcast, if several more copies are purchased, I could be above a penny an hour for investment.
Holy shit!
Which is an artist's dream. So
absolutely,
it's just wonderful. Yeah.
Well, I do hope we can get you there after this interview. Sure.
Actually, sales and interest have vastly exceeded my expectations. At times writing the book, I'm like, oh my God, my deep fear is not that I have, critics who hate the book. It'd be that no copies are sold.
Right.
So nobody recognizes, nobody reads it. So that's the big fear, right?
And that's not what happened. So
yeah, not what happened. I think
worst fear averted.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah, it's no, I think the reception's been mostly positive, which has been wonderful.
Yeah. No, I think it's amazing. Based on a lot of the text from your novella, Last Call for Heroes, as well as some of the videos on your YouTube channel, Google Sucks, you're quite scientifically literate. May I ask we said a little bit about this already, but I mean, may I ask what your background is in science and engineering?
Had a little odd jobs, part-time jobs, or done a little consulting here and there for, a few engineering places. The Event Horizon telescope that they imaged the first black hole with, I think last year or a year or two ago. In radio astronomy, I helped build the Atacama Large Millimeter Array radio telescope down in Chile.
Wow.
I was working on some of the command software on the interferometer. So I've done some of that. I got a couple of degrees in math. Wow. And taught math at a major university for a few years.
Incredible.
So, not the upper division stuff. I think the highest I went it was a few semesters of differential equations was the highest I went in teaching. Though, of course, in my own education went a lot further.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible, Connor. I am one of the most math challenged persons you will ever meet, so I'm highly impressed. You make a comment at one point that anti-natalism is the answer to Fermi's paradox. I have heard this before. I've actually heard it more in relation to ethylism. But would you mind explaining why you feel that to be true?
Yeah, and can I use tyrannosaurs as an example?
You most certainly can.
So say you have a planet and the planet's got some tyrannosaurs, or say our planet, tyrannosaurs were the first ones to reach sentience, and then, okay, they're farming other brontosauruses and, ripping their flesh apart and stuff, and they build a Tyrannosaurus spaceship. And by the time they build a Tyrannosaurus spaceship, their civilization's pretty far advanced. And then one of the Tyrannosaurs says, the brontosauruses are pretty dumb, but some of these other animals we're farming are smarter than us. Isn't it a little fucked up that we're doing this? And wouldn't it be a little fucked up for us to continue propagating and go out and colonize other planets? And aren't we pretty horrible monsters? Are we past manifest destiny and you just spread out and conquer other planets? Are we past the colonization phase? Then some of the tyrannosaurs might say, yeah, this is pretty fucking stupid. Let's just do our own great decline. And so broadly, if you think about, okay, well, why haven't we been? Fermi's paradox is if there are other alien civilizations out there, presumably they could have had a good jump on Earth. Yeah. Why haven't we heard radio waves or had some contact with them? So, and my idea is that as a civilization gets to the level where they could do interstellar travel, or about the level that humans are at now, they'll have the leisure time and the level of civilization that they might be capable as a species to have introspection. And introspection is a pretty goddamn ugly thing at a societal level if you're be introspective about your society. And you might say, let's just fuck this experiment and not reach out. So right. There's nothing that restricts the idea of anti-natalism to humans. Any other species on some other planet could come up with the same idea and decide not to colonize. And Fermi's answer was the original title of Last Call for Heroes, but I went through a few working titles and settled on an answer to Fermi or Fermi's answer were two of the original working titles.
So. Okay, that's an amazing answer. Okay, I understand that far better now. Well, thank you for that. Well, so now let's talk a little bit about your winning entry to the 6th annual Why Are You an Anti-Natalist Contest. You were, as we've said before, you were the winner of the new Anti-Natalist category, which with a wonderful little piece, a parable called Little Mosquito, a parable by Connor Garcia. I absolutely love this little piece. I'm still so happy that it was awarded the win by the rest of the community. First off, what made you decide to enter the contest last year? Had you been following the contest for a few years prior?
No, in starting to research for Last Call for Heroes was the first time I started to encounter the existence of other people who were anti-natalists. So I had just encountered that for maybe 6 months previous, but I went through and watched all your contest announcements, and all 6 years I just binged the whole damn thing, and it was wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Just freaking amazing. So,
there's been some amazing content produced over the years in response to the contest. I mean, sadly, I would say about 80% of the videos, or work that's submitted gets taken down by people, after that year of the contest ends. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you got to see some things that are long gone now that, I are just great. It's great stuff.
Yeah, there's tremendous societal pressure against continuing to be an anti-natalist.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's just a little too hard for most people to bear.
Yeah.
But I enjoy being an odd black sheep and having, bring on the haters or whatever. So
yeah.
I don't mind a little criticism. So, and then why I decided is, what can we do as anti-natalists? Well, let's do the little bit we can. Let's invest a little bit of time of ourselves, not be too hard on ourselves, but let's do a few things. And this was something that I could do. And I have a hard time making YouTube videos because I hate the sound of my own voice. So to edit, I just think I sound like just horrible.
Oh,
so
you do not.
I do not like making YouTube videos. I'm not skilled at it. I've tried and failed. Just not my medium. So I was very happy that you said, well, let's do a writing contest. I said, oh yeah, I've been writing this book. I'll write something for this contest. So that I want to help the community, help the movement. The more entrants, then that's, I think that's another thing anti-natalists are starved for is content.
Absolutely.
So great. This generates a lot of content, and the content's so interesting because it's such a not well-traveled field. Yeah. So people are doing I'm learning all kinds of stuff about people's stories. And I think the stories of anti-natalism and why people are anti-natalists are just so interesting. I couldn't get enough. Yeah. I could watch that for an hour every day.
Definitely.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. So, I mean, hey, that's why I keep doing it every year. It's like I said, I just think what comes out of it is amazing. So I'm glad you feel the same way. Can you give us a brief rundown of what this parable is about for those that haven't read it yet?
The parable is about a mosquito who says it's kind of shitty what we're doing to all the other animals. We suck their blood and just for reproduction. We could just live our lives and eat a little bit of, flower nectar or whatever, but the blood isn't used to sustain us. It's used to make more of us. And what's so freaking great about this? So it's about the little mosquito's quest for answers and what all the establishment naysayers say to the little mosquito. And I had recently been on a bunch of binge watching a bunch of debates and stuff like that. So I wrote down some of the various arguments, and I started from what I thought were the shittiest arguments to the most sophisticated, as the little mosquito is seeking more and more interesting and sophisticated arguments. So that was kind of what the parable is about. And of course it should serve as an obvious metaphor for us anti-natalists in our search for answers.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And what inspired you to write this story?
Some of it was in Mendham, because in Mendham says, we should have some parables like Aesop's fables or some shit. There's got to be an answer out there. Why can't I just think, could I say it more articulately this time? Could I just convince you people? I mean, why are you people so stupid? There should be a silver bullet, which is a parable. Something a goddamn child could understand, like the scorpion on the frog's back.
Right.
Is it so fucking hard to explain this to you idiots? And then so I thought, oh my God, yeah, somebody should write and so it was my attempt, which might fall flat, but a lot of this stuff is nobody makes good art the first time. You got to get out there and just frickin' make some shit. And
Sure.
this may be one of them that, and maybe this could be used by beginning anti-natalists as, this could be a cheat sheet for some arguments. And
Sure.
I think it's a parable. So that was my inspiration. You always sort of fall short on your art, what it appears in your mind's eye. But I was quite happy with that piece. And that was mostly the inspiration.
Well, first off, great impression of Edmundum. And second of all, no, I thought it was a great piece. I thought it was absolutely the one that deserved. I mean, there were some excellent other written responses that year as well, but I really do think that the prize went to the correct winner. And I mean, for what it's worth, years ago I did another contest called Efilit, which is a stupid name, but it was basically, it challenged people to take a well-known story that already within public consciousness and sort of rewrite it to have an ethicist message or to have an antinatalist message. And there was some really interesting stuff that came out of that. Like children's stories that were just sort of slightly twisted to be a little antinatally. And I think something like that, or that kind of approach, is very valuable.
Oh yeah, I agree.
It's interesting that unlike Last Call for Heroes, this story focuses on the life of an animal, an insect. And I thought that was a really great choice. Are you influenced at all by Brian Tomasic?
I'm not familiar with Brian Tomasic.
Oh, okay. I'll send you some stuff later. He does all kinds of. I think he's an effective altruist, although maybe I'm incorrect about that. But he does all this work about the suffering of insects. And it's just very fascinating stuff. What was it like to win the "Why Are You an Anti-natalist" contest?
It was a huge surprise because I didn't think there was any way a written entry could beat out YouTube entries. And it was absolutely wonderful. I mean, what couldn't be, great about winning a contest? It was huge. I had to restrain myself from telling all my friends about what an amazing accomplishment and how it was so cool. I won the contest. Oh my God! Which of course nobody wants to hear because none of them are anti-natalists to begin with. Though, my brother's super patient with me. He'll pretend that he's paying attention. It's very, very nice. So I was able to brag about that to him. And also, of course, it's bittersweet because I love the anti-natalist prizes and everything. They're so freaking cool. I mean, the book, the t-shirt from Life Sucks is freaking amazing. Yeah. But then I'm looking at the stuff saying, well, I'm doing pretty well. I don't need all this. I wish it had gone to somebody who would appreciate it even more. And there were other deserving YouTube videos, etc. So all that stuff is bittersweet. And that's one place where Mendham has been an influence and utterly freaking spoiled me for winning contests. Because he's like, what makes you so goddamn special that, you're winning a contest? Right. So, yeah, but absolutely so much fun to participate in the contest. So much fun to win it. So much fun to watch the voting. And getting a goodie bag is just amazing. And anti-natalist stuff, the patches and everything were just the whole goodie bag was wonderful. So I loved it. It was everything I dreamed of and more. Yeah, it was amazing.
I'm so glad. I'm glad you enjoyed the prize. And hey, you absolutely deserved it. Aside from winning, what was some of the feedback that you received about your parable?
I can't recall if I received much feedback. I think people just liked it.
Just liked it a lot, yeah.
I don't know if I think I might have seen some nice comments in the, as people said, yeah, I vote for this one. I think there were some nice comments about it. So yeah, I think people in general really liked it. I think that,
and you had reminded me just now of a detail that I honestly had forgotten, that it did beat out all the video entries. Like, because I kind of forgotten that last year I combined, people could submit either videos or writing. And yeah, that was absolutely the first year that a piece of writing had beat out the video entries. And that was really significant. It won by a huge margin too. People voted for it like crazy. So congratulations again, Connor.
I think it tied into all the anti-natalist arguments that they'd had with, I think it's easily recognizable if you're almost all those arguments are easily recognizable from the very first one, which is anti-natalism is wrong because why don't you just go kill yourself?
Right.
I mean, what a stupid fucking argument. And that's like almost the first one you get.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. I think it hit a lot of those markers for people, and that's a good explanation of it, I think.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Connor, do you encourage your fellow anti-natalists to submit work to this year's Why Are You an Antinatalist contest?
Oh my God, yeah, it's so much fun. The contest is so great. Submit work and be a part of it. And don't be so damn hard on yourself.
Yes.
Like my friend once told me, stop beating yourself up, you stupid piece of shit.
Yes, listen to Connor.
Don't be so hard on yourself. Produce a YouTube video. You can keep it simple, keep it sweet. Heck, you can produce a YouTube video that's 20 seconds long if it's a short explanation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Post, do your YouTube and post it. It's a lot of fun, and it's really fun and interesting to be a part of the community. And I think for the most part, the anti-natalist community is really welcoming, and it's nice. I mean, like AK Hunter said on your last podcast, he really wanted to participate because he felt like this is a community he could really belong to.
Yeah.
Please, everybody, submit. Yeah, it's great to get more entries.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that, Connor. And speaking of the fabulous prizes, one lucky person that wins the new Anti-natalist category this year will receive a special prize created by you. Would you mind telling everybody about this amazingly beautiful thing that you've made and are donating as a prize for the contest this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I picked up a set of old railroad spikes out of Tie Siding, Wyoming about 20, 30 years ago, where they went into business. I think they were in business around the 1860s, so producing railroad ties for the Transcontinental Railroad. And then they tore it all out, so there were a bunch of railroad spikes. So I filled up a backpack of railroad spikes. And these are the, 6 or 8 inch long giant nails that they use to nail the rails to the ties. And then I love the logo for the Exploring Antinatalism podcast from Life Sucks. So I stole it and I forged Ouroboros with an A and then fabricated an A out of bar stock. I forged the Ouroboros, the snake, out of the railroad spikes and just copied his design and then welded that onto a small 6 inch by 3 or 4 inch piece of angle iron, they call it, though it's steel, it's mild steel, and polished it up, finished it up, and made bookends. So they're 3D forged steel bookends. They're quite small. Like I said, the Ouroboros is only 6 inches wide, but they weigh 6 pounds each.
Wow.
Because they're all solid steel. And then, so that was a pretty fun thing. And then I took footage of the crafting of those and edited the footage, and I may do a voiceover. I may do a voiceover for my for why I'm an anti-natalist, for my contribution to the next session. And this is also stealing a bunch of Life Sucks work, because some of my favorite Life Sucks videos are where he's doing tracing and then talking about the tracing. I could watch Life Sucks draw. That's another thing.
Forever.
Wonderful. And his videos. Oh my God. And I know I won't be able to beat Life Sucks in the returning Anti-natalist contest, but I definitely won't be if I don't try. And I asked Life Sucks for the permission, by the way, to steal his design for the forged bookends. So I did get Life Sucks. He said, yeah, it's fine. That works. He allows it. So I think someone, if they enjoy, hopefully it's not someone who wins a contest and then says, oh, I'm not an anti-natalist anymore.
It could happen. I hate to say that, but yeah, no, that is absolutely lovely, Connor. Well, first of all, I'm so happy you're going to be making a new contest entry for this year's contest. And the bookends are just absolutely gorgeous. They are gorgeous. I will put, a picture of them over, our voices when I release this, so people can see it ahead of time. But just absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much. What a magnificent way to hand down your reigning crown to the next winner of the year.
Hey, you're quite welcome. What do I do with a a couple $100,000 worth of frickin' metal equipment in the shop. If not, hey, I can do some
Gotta
steel
use it
art.
for something. Yeah. Have you done much sculpture in the past?
Yeah, I've done a ton of sculpture, but I'm sort of somewhere between craft and art.
Okay.
I've done a ton of sculpture, and I've done a ton of functional furniture. I've done, busts, the head and shoulders of people in clay before. I've done a bunch of ice. So yeah, I've done a bunch of that stuff.
Amazing. Well,
mostly in clay and ice. That's the two medias that I don't think I've ever done a piece of sculpture on hand forged. I think I think this is the first piece of artwork I've blacksmithed. I've done knives, which are, a lot of knives, which are boring.
I would never know. I mean, you seem to be pretty have a lot of versatility with it. I mean, working with metal is so difficult. I've done a lot of clay sculpture, but never with ice. I mean, those are all very difficult mediums. So
yeah, ice is hard. Marble is super hard.
Yeah.
There's a couple of those media that I don't think metal's that hard if you have a shitload of tools and a ton of welding and fabrication experience.
Sure.
So I've built a bunch of Bobcat buckets, giant Bobcat buckets, and tailgates and frames and trailers and all that stuff, the big size stuff. So I got all the equipment, which makes a huge difference. I guess it's like anything else. If you have a bunch of the tools and equipment, woodworking's a similar example.
Oh, woodworking! I'm awful. I'm awful at woodworking. They don't let me anywhere near the table saw.
You just need.
you need to be tall and you need to be strong too for some of these mediums, and I'm just neither of those things.
You just need 3,000 hours of experience and an incredible shop.
Yeah,
and then some of the pieces don't end up looking like shit.
Yeah,
so that's great.
I'll stick to my super sculpey, but I have huge respect for people that have the ability to work in those mediums. I think it's amazing. So for anybody that's thinking about it out there, July 3rd is your first opportunity to submit something and possibly have the ability to win Connor's amazing sculpture. So thank you so much again for doing that, Connor. So now has come to the time to discuss your novella, Last Call for Heroes. I want to start out by saying how much I truly did love this book, Connor. I think it's got a really fascinating it got a really fascinating mixed reaction from the rest of the community, which I want to talk all about in a bit. But really, I think you did a truly great job writing an engaging and powerful work through Last Call for Heroes. In the words of the great A.K. Hunter, in his review of Last Call for Heroes, he said that Connor Garcia paints a beautiful antinatalist landscape. And I think that he's absolutely correct about that. To me, this is a very peaceful vision of the end, that as peaceful a vision of the end as one could hope for, really. It surprises me that some people didn't really see it that way. So I was wondering if we could begin by just reading the synopsis to help sort of frame the story for our audience. Would you like to read it, or would you like me to read it?
Oh, I'd love it if you read it.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
I don't mind at all. No, not at all. The year is 2199, and humans are on the brink of extinction. Almost everyone on Earth is an antinatalist, convinced procreation is immoral. Each generation is less than 1/10 the size of the previous generation. Like a zombie virus, antinatalism forces its infected victims to spread it, especially to children. Eris, the one person with hope left for humanity, finds a partially completed interstellar ship. Can he finish the ship and escape the solar system before he is discovered? Will a soft spot for his infected antinatalist brother prove to be his undoing? We all hope Eris wins, since, after all, Eris is humanity's last hero, isn't he? Last Call for Heroes was published on Amazon July 17th, 2020. So actually, this interview will be released 2 days before the book has its first birthday, interestingly enough.
Great.
Yeah, a little point there. You've spoken a little bit about this already, but I have to ask, how did the idea for this book in particular first come about?
I had thought about writing a little short story. Occasionally I'd write a funny story, or something that I was interested in, and share it with friends and family via email. and I was talking to some folks I occasionally work with in a brewery, and was kind of arguing with them about anti-natalism. This was before I even knew about a word for it, and I didn't know anybody else shared the same view. And then I was kind of talking about how it related to Fermi's paradox. And then I said it'd be interesting to write a short story that's like the Tyrannosaurus Rex or some aliens on a planet. They get ready for interstellar travel, and then they say, we aren't really into colonization and, manifest destiny and all that. So we're just going to, instead, we're just going to can our civilization and our society. And we're not going to do that. And then that's that. And then that's an answer to Fermi's paradox, is that in order to have the leisure time and understanding of interstellar travel, your civilization also has to come up a little bit morally, or it just generally does. And you realize that's not a good thing. And then I thought, well, in this case, why write a freaking allegory for humans? Just write it about humans. So I switched it to about humans. And then when I started writing, it rapidly turned into a novella. I just let it expand until I felt like it was done. And then, that's the size it was.
How long did it take to write and complete?
I try to blank out and not recall.
Okay, I hear you.
So I purposefully have not done that good of accounting, and I'd love this answer to be consistent with what I said in my interview with the Friendly Antinatalist, though I doubt it will. And here it is a few years later, but I think I hammered out the first draft. In some cases, I remember writing a couple thousand words in a session. Work for 8 or 10 hours in the day, come back and hammer out a couple thousand or 2, 3, 4,000 words in after working, just okay. Oh, it's 1 a.m. I got to get to work at 7. I better go get some shut eye. So it just, it's like I was possessed. And then editing, of course, was several more times as long as writing the original book. Writing the original draft. And there was an enormous amount of changes that happened. A lot of stuff was cut. I changed characters' names. I mean, I just hammered the shit out of the first draft until I thought, oh yeah, this is good enough. I think with my editor, we went through, I'd say at least 20 drafts.
Wow.
And then I probably went through 5 or 6 printed proofs, and there was still an error, a typo on one of the pages.
I saw that. It's about is it something about IPA beer or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And then, but the contest winners and prize givers for the last Anti-natalist, because I published this about the time I won that prize, so I sent you a bunch of copies.
Yes.
They have that, but I think all the other purchasers purchased clean copies, because as soon as I saw my copy, I went back and re-uploaded PDF to Amazon, who does print by demand. So you and the other folks are the only ones with a draft with that error, I believe.
Okay. Well, in addition to your sculpture, one of the other prizes will be copies of Last Call for Heroes, because I still have quite a few of the copies that you sent me. So future winners will also have that the edition with the little mistake in there. So
hopefully it doesn't affect readability much.
No, of course not. Of course not. Speaking of little Easter eggs, I just want to quickly say that I loved all the little Easter eggs throughout the whole book, little references to various anti-natalists and anti-natalism history. Couldn't help but notice that Gary and somebody named Amanda are the namesakes of 2 of Cole's students. So thank you so much, Connor, for that. How many Easter eggs are in the book, and are there any you'd like to comment on at all here?
There are 17 Easter eggs. And if anybody wants to comment on this, if you know of Easter eggs, put them up in the YouTube comments in this. I'd suggest putting them up in the YouTube comments in this interview. We'll see if the community can get all the Easter eggs.
I actually thought there were only 12, so there's more than I thought. I'm sorry that I just gave 2 of them away, but yes, in the comments, everybody.
Fine.
If you can name all 17, I'd like to see that too. Won't give any more away.
There are some easy ones, and there are some that are extremely subtle.
I may have to come up with a list myself, see if I can get them. So moving into some of the details you give about, how your antinatalist world developed in Last Call for Heroes. I was intrigued by the fact that the antinatalists in your world are children's rights advocates, or that's in large part where it sort of began. What is the Children's Rights Amendment in Last Call for Heroes?
This is terrible because I'm writing my new book at this time. So, I hate to misquote myself, but I think the Children's Rights Amendment is that children have the right to be free from abuse, and they have the right to information, and that's the major amendment. And then the next amendment, I think that might be the 30th Amendment, and then I think the 31st is that children have the right not to be born without their consent.
And those two amendments just completely changed this world that everybody was living in, and that was basically the start of the antinatalist world in Last Call for Heroes.
Absolutely.
How are people still having children in this world? I mean, some birth is definitely still allowed because there are still children at this point within the story. Is it you have to get a license to have a child, or I know you don't go into quite that detail within the book, but I'm just curious what your thoughts on that are.
Somewhere in the book is a section where they talk about the child's right not to be born is not enforced.
Right.
So
right.
people are free to have children. There's nothing restricting. You don't have to have a license. You don't have to do anything, and there isn't forced sterilization. In effect, you're going to get shamed.
Right.
And there'll be a social stigma associated with it. There's a social stigma associated with it. So people are still having children, and some birth is still allowed. And I did a series of long simulations where I was altering the birth rates and determining how long it would take for the society to die out. And I was messing with these population pyramids. So I'm sure you're familiar with the population pyramids. There's something you can look up on Wikipedia or something. And if you look up population pyramids for some of the places in Africa, it actually looks like a pyramid where the x-axis is a histogram count of how many people are in each category, and the y-axis, which is age, starting at 0 at the origin and moving up to 100 at the top. So there are many more people from 0 to 5 than there are from 5 to 10, et cetera, all the way up. So the vast majority of some of these impoverished nations in Africa are under 30 years old. Mm-hmm. And then you look at the population pyramid of Japan, where the birth rate is lower than replacement, which is about 2.1, and what you see is an inverted pyramid in the same histogram. So I ran mathematical simulations that were a lot more sophisticated than I could get a hold of in the literature to try to do a more accurate understanding of how long it takes to die out and what the birth rate is. But birth rate here is in the neighborhood of 0.1. Okay.
How many people are still left on Earth by the time our story begins during this phase of the Great Decline? Sorry.
A million. Around a million. Okay. I think, if I recall correctly, around 1 million. I had probably an equal amount of material in appendices to this book before I published it. So I had appendices with timelines. I had appendices with population demographics, world population demographics, equations and mathematical models and all this stuff. And, my editor, I think, rightly convinced me to nix all those appendices.
Okay.
So there's a tremendous amount of work that was created to modeling and stuff created to support making this as accurate as I could.
Yeah. Interesting. It's interesting what was all the things that were cut out of the work before it was published. I love getting some insight into that. I was tremendously intrigued by the fact that your antinatalists of this world sprung out of the atheist movement. I love that because I think that's the way it would go, sort of, but also that is sort of what happened on YouTube too. We had the atheist community, and then from that, sort of came the antinatalist community, so it sort of had a real life basis in some respects, from my perspective anyway, and that the atheists and the antinatalists had formed sort of this alliance. Can you tell me anything about the atheists in Last Call for Heroes and how they led up to the antinatalism's emergence?
In general, I think atheists are less hampered by the rigid structure and edicts of their religious books or doctrine. So they're able to think outside the box a little bit more thoroughly. So if the religious folks say, well, God commanded you go forth, be fruitful and multiply, the atheists say there is no such commandment, and we don't honor that commandment. And so they're able to think a little bit more freely. So the anti-natalism finds more fertile ground in freer thinking brains. So that's sort of, what I was thinking along those lines.
Interesting. The world in which the characters of Last Call for Heroes exist seem to have reached a turning point due to one American president, essentially, President Yang. This was the one part of the backstory I was personally most fascinated by. Can you tell me more about this character, President Yang? She's the one character that I would love to, if you ever did have an interest in writing like a backstory, I was just sort of intrigued to learn more about this particular character.
I think when you become president or you serve office, you get down selected into a certain type of beliefs, because if you have certain types of beliefs, then you will not be electable. So you don't make it past your local school board in your ascent in politics. So you essentially have to lie or bullshit, or you really have to be, dyed in the wool, a certain thing to get through politics. And, for us, people suspect that perhaps Barack Obama was atheist. Oh my God. That's a bigger scandal than any of the other conspiracy theories. Right. Oh, what if he was atheist because he was so, science-based? So in my opinion, there's a point in which the politics change, and there are so many anti-natalists and so many people who are anti-procreation, and a great decline becomes so inevitable that someone in the government says, oh, I'm going to switch my whole damn platform because President Yang, she's changing it this is part of her bid to get elected.
Right.
So I think she's very clever politically, saying, holy shit, acknowledging this problem of declining population and talking about a plan and creating a call to action for the entire nation to try to survive and thrive through this problem could be an incredible election platform. And probably she is in favor of the Great Decline anyhow. Right. So the turning point is sort of more of the turning point of the people, where somebody can say, a progressive candidate can say, I'm casting aside all the entrenched bullshit and I'm casting aside my advisors. I'm going to run on this new platform and hope to be elected president. So that's some of the backstory in my thinking behind the development of President Yang as a character.
Okay, fascinating. She gives a speech that's later read by Cole in the book that essentially turned the whole world antinatal. Would you mind if I read that aloud, or would you like to read it aloud?
No, I have my own intonations and my own idea how it's read because I've read it to myself aloud. So I would love to hear you read it aloud.
Okay. Yeah, I absolutely. Citizens of the United States, humans on Earth, what has been long denied can no longer be denied. Our species has entered the Great Decline, from which we may never recover. The basis of our world economy, constant growth, has ended. We are sliding down a precipice. Will we starve while our fields lay fallow? Will our infrastructures fail for the want of labor? Must we collapse from the demographic weight of an aging population? Will our promise to ourselves never to return to the horrors of death camps be sundered? Will our kind leave this earth as we came into it, in ignorance, in famine, and blood? I was warned. They warned me not to call for babies, to denounce the anti-natalists. They warned me to call for babies as my fellow presidential candidates do. But I will not call for babies. That call has long been unheeded. Nor will I make a baby myself, for my conscience prohibits such. Instead, I will call for heroes. I call for the titans of industry to shrink without going bankrupt. I call for logicians and civil servants to schedule, organize, and orchestrate city evacuations. I call for environmental engineers to minimize the damage we do as we depart. I call for medical professionals to ensure the dignity of every single human being as they pass. I call for the hero in you, in every single one of you, to help manage this decline. I know the hero that is inside of me is the hero that is inside of you. Join me as we will go out, not with a whimper, but standing upright, hand in hand, as the last of us turns out the lights. We are sliding down a precipice. It may already be too late. The stakes for humanity have never been higher. Heed my call for heroes. This is the last call for heroes. It's just an amazing speech. Can you tell me something about when you wrote that? I'm sorry I kind of fumbled a couple of lines there, but I really do think it's one of the best parts of the whole book.
Oh, no. Yeah, I think you read it beautifully.
Thank you.
And I really enjoyed writing it, and it is central to the book, and it's the book name. And I think after reading the president's speech, my editor said, Fermi's answer, what a shitty title. Just call it Last Call for Heroes.
Wow.
And totally right. The last call for heroes is to say, can we exit in dignity?
Right.
You know, and I mean, that's it. And the number of times it was written and rewritten, I wrote and rewrote it a number of times. I watched, I think, a film called The City with Al Pacino, where he makes an incredible speech. I read some of Lincoln's speeches and some other presidential speeches, and did my best to spend some time. And then I had even messed with layout to try to get it on a single page, until finally we said, my editor and I was like, no, write it the best speech you can, and it's fine if it's not on 2 pages. And then I sort of, fantasized about people reading the speech and being moved, having some emotion from reading the speech. And this is one of the parts of the books that is not so far-fetched, because, look at Korea. 1.4 is their birth rate.
Yeah.
They're declining. A lot of these other places are going to decline too. And the U.S. would be in decline if it wasn't for our immigration policy. Right. And 2020 was our lowest birth rate on record. And it's going to continue, demographic projections. Looks like we're still going to decline. So I felt wonderfully privileged to be able to talk about this story as one of the first stories. And it'll be interesting in 20 or 50 years if some of the themes and some of the stuff in this book, come back.
Yeah. Well, yes, I agree completely. I mean, it's how much of your speculative fiction will be, the actual future. So, no, I think it's an incredibly powerful piece. I certainly had emotions reading it. It would be really interesting to do as a standalone video, I think. It'd be interesting to see other people do that. What does it mean that Moore's Law would stand after the Great Decline?
I can't remember exactly where that was in the book.
Okay,
but
sorry.
I think people said that they had thought that Moore's Law would stand after the Great Decline, but it hadn't.
Okay.
But Moore's Law is the law that you, for the same amount of money, you can double the number of transistors on a chip every 18 months. Okay. But Moore's Law is sort of changed to be thought of as, for the same amount of money, you can buy double the computing power in 18 months. And they've done various things like, get a 1 gigabyte hard drive from 10 years ago, and then think about getting a 1 gigabyte hard drive today, or whatever your computing power is. And people thought that would still continue to happen after the Great Decline. But when demand drops, there's no reason for our whole R&D groups to be pushing this stuff. So yeah, when demand drops in the Great Decline, Moore's law didn't stand, and computing resources didn't increase, though spoiler, in this they had come up with a quantum computer that was tremendously fast and changed a lot of stuff. Not that much because the decline had already happened, but the quantum computing is an important part of the story, and that just jumps orders and orders of magnitude past Moore's law.
Right. Okay, I see. Interesting. No, thank you for that explanation. Moving on to the main characters of Last Call for Heroes, the focus is really on these polar opposite lives of these two brothers, both living in an antinatal world. Cole, an atheist and antinatalist, and Eris, a Christian and vehement, no pun intended, pro-lifer, anti-natalist. You said at one point in one of the interviews that you'd done that neither of the characters are likable. I do kind of agree with that. Although I grew to like Cole, and I grew to sort of empathize with both of them. But I get what you meant by that, and I liked that. I kind of think that it was a smart move because it makes it harder for the reader to select who the hero is based on who they like better as a personality. Was that sort of intentional on your part?
Absolutely. And I don't want to write a story that overly valorizes anti-natalist position or anti-natalist because I don't think it's an interesting work. So I could write a story where the anti-natalist is smart and all the natalists are dumb, but that's really not very realistic. There are plenty of genius natalists and there are plenty of stupid anti-natalists. Yeah. Of course, I'm in the anti-natalist camp, so I'm biased. We think we've got all the answers, but it really isn't realistic. And I don't. If you make your main character like all powerful or some high school boy's ego trip, then it might make for decent, superhero fiction, but man, it just doesn't seem to have the depth or reach. So I don't want to superpowerify any of the characters. And genuinely in the book, I wanted to write a book in which it was unclear what the author's position was. It was more of a Rorschach. So now talking about sculpture or pieces of art, right? If you make a piece of art where there's some ambiguity, or it can be viewed in a couple of different ways and bring up various different emotions, and maybe there are some questions that are brought up or not answered or some of this, and it provokes thought, then this is the type of art I really like, even though sometimes this type of art makes me feel uncomfortable. So this is some of my aspiration. I don't want to make this purely a pulp, which pulp is sort of designed to be easy to read and it makes the reader feel good. You can live out some of your fantasies through the character. But I wasn't trying to write that type of book. So no, I don't want to trump up everybody to make everybody, bigger and better and nicer and funner than life.
Right.
Because I just don't think it makes for as interesting of a work.
Well, it makes it so much more interactive too, because you are challenging people, with this question of who the hero really is. And so again, I just think that was such a smart move on your part.
Yeah, I've had a couple of pro-natalist friends with children who've read the book. Oh, wow. And they say, wow, this is such a good and interesting book. And it was so great that Eris escaped with the spacecraft, and spoiler, and it's so great that he wins and Eris is just the best. Man, Cole, what a shitty, wishy-washy character that was. And yeah, this is pretty dark stuff. Do you think anti-natalism could ever actually catch on? And I say, yeah, I think it could. And they're like, wow, this is a good warning that, human society should never. So, they think I wrote it from a pro-natalist perspective, and I don't educate them on that. It's fine.
That's incredible. I mean, that shows that people can engage with it from different perspectives, and then from there, have conversations, with people of different perspectives on it. And so I just think it speaks to that interactivity that I think you've created with this work. Connor, can you tell the story a little bit about what happened to both Cole and Eris to separate them as children that led to these big differences in their worldview? as kids, they ended up being separated for years on end. And can you just talk a little bit about what happened to them exactly?
Sure. They were both born to religious parents, but at the age of 5, part of the enforcement of the right to information for children is that they get to go to school, and because they get to go to school, they have to go to school because, agency is a real challenging thing with children, so they have to go to school. So Cole's parents were kind of not part of the program, kind of not getting him registered the way he should. So eventually Child Protective Services just snatches him up and says, no, he's going to damn school. So Cole ends up going to school, and Cole was never a huge fan of the Christian stuff. So he also has a personality that tends towards skepticism and atheism and anti-natalism. And when he gets the critical thinking and some of the stuff that he's forced to get, he latches onto that, and he becomes, he says, oh yeah, I'm definitely atheist and anti-natalist, but he can't get away with that at home.
Yeah.
Because his father beats him for it at his mother's request. So then when Cole's parents have Eris, who's the younger son, they hide him from Child Protective Services. And so Cole's going to school learning critical thinking and various histories of world religions, etc. But Eris is being indoctrinated by the parents. And a long course of childhood religious indoctrination is a tough thing to shake. So this is sort of how they go down different roads in, their natalist, anti-natalist, atheist, Christian beliefs. And I think this is so common in families that have exactly the same upbringing.
Yeah.
I mean, I have, several siblings who are religious, pretty staunchly religious. So,
well, yeah.
I think this stuff happens, in regular families.
It absolutely does. Yeah.
And I think a lot of this is also sort of based on personality and how you think and what you resonate towards as well. So that's the story of Cole and Eris.
No, I appreciate that. I just, for the sake of our audience, I thought it was important that people sort of understand, where their base was, what had happened to them. So thank you for those details. So I'd like to focus a little bit on each of the main characters individually. I think by the end, both, are really well-developed characters. I think you did a great job, building them over the course of the story. Let's start off with Cole. He's the older anti-natalist of the brothers. Tell me how you came up with his character in the process of writing his development.
Oh, kind of a overweight, schlubby, indecisive, weird-looking, shy person. This is that bears no resemblance to the author. I mean, just randomly different than so in writing, which makes it so frickin' hard, you need both the creative end, and then you need to be just viciously pragmatic. And this is what makes writing so hard. Yeah. So my attempt at writing and the way I did this book, I don't know if this is the right way or not. I let myself go crazy when I wrote the first draft and said, if I feel like writing, I'm writing it, and I'm not going back to double check. I'm not really thinking about the characters that much or motivations or any of this type of crap. I'm just sort of letting it go natural flow. And then I might reread some of the draft. Oh, I could do this other section here. And then I've got just this sort of a lump of partial stream of consciousness, semi-forged stuff. And this is when the real work begins. And then there may be additional pieces of that. So I'm not necessarily writing Cole specifically, though, with anything in mind, or Eris with anything real necessary in mind, though there's some decisions that have to be made. I like the opposition because I can frame arguments in the form of dialogue rather than narrative. And I think dialogue works so much better to frame certain types of arguments. But, if this writing in this creative process, if you say, well, why did you make some of these decisions and how did you do some of this stuff? It's like I don't know. I let the stupid. So Sam Harris has the elephant and the mahout concept, where the human's both an elephant and the mahout. The mahout's the bigger brain that's making some of the decisions, and the elephant's just going off gallivanting or whatever. The elephant wrote this frickin' story. So I'm like, Jesus take the wheel, or whatever the atheist equivalent of that is, flying spaghetti monster take the keyboard, so it's sort of stream of consciousness. But then the real work begins, and I had to shitty up Cole, and I had to soften Eris a lot after the first several drafts. And this was in response to some of the comments that I begrudgingly had to agree with from the two readers who managed to make it through the first rough draft. So I had several readers sent out, so a few of them managed to like, God, Eris is such a fucking asshole. I just can't even get through the book. Okay, I'll soften him. Well, is Cole really that good? No, I'll worsen him. I'll harden him a little bit. Okay, yeah. So, sorry, I'm sure that's an unsatisfying answer to.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. No. Thank you for those details. I mean, about Cole, there's a strange kind of innocence to Cole's character. Like, in many ways, he's sort of like the perfect product of this antinatal world that he's been born into. But like a child, almost, I think there's a lot of times in the book he's constantly being challenged to kind of flirt with the dark side, so to speak, particularly in the way that he's challenged to find like the boundaries of his veganism. Like, we're going to eat meat, but it's okay for this reason this time, or it's okay for that reason this time. He's kind of like, I just thought that was so interesting that kind of kept happening to him, where, he was allowed to sort of be lax in his ethics and be challenged by that. Was that an intentional part of his character?
Absolutely. So a lot of us, the bulk of society now never has long ethical discussions and thinks about the various points of ethics for hours at a time, and has big arguments on YouTube about some obscure piece that they, find some disagreement, manufacture some disagreement, and all this stuff. The bulk of us get our morals and ethics societally indoctrinated by culture and don't think about them too much. So this is Cole to a T. He's not a deep thinking anti-natalist thinker. He's swallowed whatever. He's swallowed most of the bullshit that he's gotten. So he hasn't really, he sort of questioned his beliefs as he was coming out of it, but that was in his childhood. He's concentrated on teaching. He's a professor and doing various other stuff. And he just isn't, he's never really thought that much. So, yeah, you said I see him as sort of, in that way, he's average in terms of, if you took an average person in today's society and talked to them about veganism or moral behavior or this type of thing too, their level of thought is so poor. You just can't overstate how fucking stupid humans are. And naive, and we're good at being willfully stupid, because I think in the past, those who weren't willfully, somebody points out the emperor's not wearing clothes, they got their damn head chopped off and they're out of the damn gene pool.
Right.
So, we go along. We're incredibly good at that type of thing. So most of us have never questioned our views. Anti-natalists, we think, oh yeah, haven't you ever deeply thought about? Well, anti-natalists have, because it takes that type of person to get away. So that's sort of some of the reasons why Cole's so innocent. And also, I'll have to admit that this is just a cheap trick I use to use him as a foil to tell some of the story that I like.
Sure.
Though hopefully it's consistent enough with other parts of his character that
I think it is. Yeah.
You can see. And these are the interesting parts of some of the books I like, is that there's some moral conundrums and stuff that people sort of have to work out. This to me is more interesting than a supervillain. Instead of a supervillain, you set up the characters in various moral conundrums and see them attempt to work it out. It's a much more interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's also the sense, like, it's like you tap into sort of, I think, what would be a psychological reality of living in that world, where, like, there just is no future. Like we're closing up shop. So you would get people that are kind of coasting through their life in some respects. And that does kind of come through with him a little bit, I think. But I liked that. I just thought that was a very realistic aspect of his character for somebody living in that world. Cole, for me, is at times a very tragic character in a lot of ways. Just as an example, I don't know if he would have been asexual, if he didn't live in an antinatalist society. But he is somebody that was sort of, I guess, voluntarily, because I don't think you're
that's right. He
required,
yep.
to do hormone blockers, but his not hormone, but libido blockers, from the age of 16. So there's just sort of a sort of tragedy that he's. That's not really a tragedy, but I mean he's somebody that just hasn't been able to explore a lot of life, and I mean there's sort of like this. When he's talking to Fiona, I think is her name. Yeah, I mean, there is like a little bit of a feeling like this could be a sexual relationship, and there's no really reason for him not to, but he chooses to anyway. I mean, do you see Cole as a tragic character at all?
Oh yeah, I see Cole as a tragic character, and I think this is a common tragedy of human beings. Like I'm reading stuff about, kids in their 20s who live in LA who have never seen the ocean. I mean, isn't this some of the tragedy of most of us, where it's the tragedy of unrealized potential?
Yeah.
And maybe unrealized travel, unrealized stuff. Oh yeah, I think terribly tragic, and such a common tragedy for human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess there are some spoilers involved in this question, but I hope that's all right. But
I don't mind. I say we spoil the whole damn thing. I mean,
okay.
those who have bought and read the book, probably bought and read the book. But I'm a spoiler guy. I don't mind any spoilers. So
as long as that's okay with you. Well, I will say, everyone perhaps go buy and read the book before you go on. But in a lot of ways, Cole really fucks up as an antinatalist in Last Call for Heroes. Like, he essentially totally helps to damn the existence of life, on this planet by, kind of maybe ensuring that it will continue, all because he has this selfish need for family in a weird way. I like the book that makes. I like that the book makes this really depressing but salient point about the strength of the idea of family and that hold that it has on us. Like, Cole just wants his brother back. He wants a taste of family back in his life. And by rights, this sort of shouldn't be a transgression, by itself. But in effect, the whole world has to pay, the price of his loneliness. Cole is weak. His need to relate to a blood relation won out, over his ethics. And it's sad, and it kind of does make him the villain in some respects. What do you think about this aspect of Cole's character? Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And this stuff gets so complicated. So I was talking to my brother last night, and we have a family member who just recently had a child. And she's a single mom. She's working her ass off. And my brother and I were talking about, our lives and how hard it was for us. And we're talking about, hey, we're doing pretty well. Both of us are doing pretty well now. If our family member wanted to buy a house, then would we just be willing to pool our resources for, a 50 grand down payment, 60 grand down payment? And so she could get her own damn house and be paying a mortgage rather than rent, which is what she's doing now. And holy shit, what a fucking moral conundrum. Because something like that would have made such a big difference to me 20 years ago. I would have, I scraped together money. I could not afford the down payment, which meant my mortgage was much higher and interest terms were so much shittier. It would have made just a huge difference. That and student loans, if I'd just been able to get a little bit of financial help in that point. So that's an inflection point. Well, now I'm doing well. Yeah. So now could I go back and sort of, pay it backwards? And then I'm thinking, well, okay, if she's got a real nice setup, what's to prevent her from saying, well, that's a great thing where I can just have more children?
Right.
I'm just set. I'll just keep, having more children. So it's like, oh my God, these are, in an ethics class or some other dumb shit, you got most of the problems where they have ethical solutions, right? Well, this bears no similarity to reality. So some of why I'm writing Last Call for Heroes is you're kind of fucked just about any way you get it. Yeah. Though I would sort of disagree that Cole helped, but the help's in parentheses. He's kind of a fuck up, and Eris is the real genius. So he didn't need Cole's help. He's got Cole sort of hanging around. And that's also, true. I'd say, no spoilers, there's redemption for Cole at the end, at least with his intentions.
Yes,
he
that is also true.
And tries to make the right choice. So there is some attempt at character development. But during the time where Cole's helping Eris, he's definitely a villain. I mean, he's weak and he's doing some shit. If he could just zoom out a little bit, you realize, no, I need to call the authorities or get this thing stopped somehow.
Right.
Absolutely. And isn't that the reality of us? Isn't this the same argument with Inmendum about cats? They're spending so much money on cats. They spend all these resources to neuter a single cat. And it doesn't make sense because there's a billion other cats running around who are not neutered. This is not helping the problem. They have such good intentions and they fuck it up so much. And I just love watching that from Inmendum, and he's damn right. And that's Cole too. Yeah. Great intention and just fucks it up and gets it wrong. Yeah. And oh God, that might be deeply unsatisfying, and people might just cringe when they write it. But I love or read it. But I loved writing it. It was a blast to write, and I love reading that type of stuff.
Sure, of course, yeah. No, and good point about his sort of redemption at the end and his intentions, and again, I think it's very it's very realistic. Like, of course, people would fall into that. Of course, people are weak. Of course, people aren't these. Perfect cookie cutter, examples of performing ethics, So yeah, I mean, thank you for your thoughts on that. Sure. There's a certain amount of shock that the characters, particularly Cole, have at the world they're living in at times. Like when Ben wants to die with dignity, Cole isn't really that accepting of it, calls it selfish. And I found that really interesting that Ben's graceful exit was not just accepted. Like you almost think that choosing euthanasia, choosing a graceful exit would be, like so mundane in this world. And it was just kind of interesting that it wasn't. I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that at all.
Yeah, like I said, I used Cole as kind of a foil to have my own plot and bring in some of the discussions that I want to bring. But I think this is definitely could be realistic or semi-realistic. When people are dying, the people around them are usually not thinking about the dying person. They're thinking about their own selfish shit.
That's true.
So, I mean, that's that. When I've been around people who are dying, everybody around the person who's dying is thinking about their own selfish shit.
Yeah.
How is this going to affect me? What's going to happen to me, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think, and I would certainly, I certainly have fallen into that category myself. I'm no saint.
No, I have too. No, sure.
So
sure.
it gets really real and weird when you're around somebody. So I think about my mother, who I loved. If she was to call me up and say, Connor, I want to go out tomorrow, I'd say, no, just give it one more week. I'm in the goddamn car, Mom. Don't take the fucking heroin. Just give me a few days. God damn it, I'm on my way up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's yeah. So also, this is really hard stuff to visualize and write, so I might get a bunch of this not quite right, or I agree with you. That could be something that could have been done better in the book.
I don't really think of. and it wasn't my intention to bringing it up to say that it was a fault in the writing. I just thought it was an interesting choice, and I appreciate the way that you answered it for sure. Okay, well now let's take a closer look at Eris, Cole's younger brother, who desperately wants to build a new world on a faraway planet, get away from all those filthy antinatalists. Tell me about Eris. Tell me a little bit about how you came up with his character and his development.
I imagine Eris something like, a Gaston in Beauty and the Beast. Okay, he's got a hell of a smile. He's, he's real charismatic. He's doing all this stuff. And this is your classic hero type from science fiction stories. He's going to save the human race. The human race is bent on self-destruction. He's going to go out and colonize another planet. He's doing all the good stuff. But these are plays on tropes about colonization and manifest destiny and this type of stuff to a great extent too. So and he's pretty damn flat, so I had to spend a lot of time, and I hate making him out to be some of a hero, so he's my least favorite character to write, and his dialogue, etc. A lot of the things he says I find abhorrent, and I'm totally against it, but I wanted to write him in a way that was the most convincing, so I also did some research and stole some stuff, stole, borrowed, copied other stuff from other sources to try to, make him a little bit more realistic. I wanted him to resonate with, oh yeah, you're saving the human race. Standard hero. But in another way, anti-natalism reframes everything, right? So you see,
of course,
such a hero.
Yeah. Well, he, of course, Eris, in my eyes, is the villain. I mean, of course, in many ways, he is utterly detestable. Yet, like Cole, he's also a very sad character. His whole life is filled with mourning, and I do end up having a lot of empathy for him, actually. He's kind of an anachronism. His genius is not something that the world has a place for anymore. And he is a genius. He's able to break the speed of light, using 100-year-old equipment. But humanity has abandoned the advancement of intelligence, so there's nothing for him to do here. Even his wanting to be a father, even though I'm, against that, it's kind of sad because there's just nowhere to put those desires. Like, none of these desires that he has can really be fulfilled, or so we think. That's all over. So it's hard for for somebody to live with stuck living with that kind of yearning, forever. Eris says that he has found a Goldilocks planet to travel to, and he and Cole name it Omelas. Can you tell me what is a Goldilocks planet for our audience that have not read the book yet?
Well, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Goldilocks goes in and sees three bowls of porridge, and one's too hot and one's too cold, and one's just right. So she eats the middle bear's porridge. Well, if you go to a planetary or stellar system and you look at all the planets, some are going to be too hot, some are going to be too cold, and one's going to be just right for human habitation or the development, evolution of life or whatnot. So astronomers coin the term Goldilocks planet as, this planet is just right for life. And generally, we're so myopic, we think it's got to be the same as Earth, right? Because we only have one freaking example. You don't have a big sample size to choose from of planets that, people can live on.
Right.
So that's what a Goldilocks planet, just right. People can live there.
Okay, no, thank you for that explanation. Eris comments about how he thinks the antinatal world is a zombie world, when in fact it's natalists who are essentially, metaphorically raising the dead, so to speak. But I find this a fascinating idea, antinatalism as a zombie virus. Can you tell me a little bit about that idea, your thoughts on that idea as antinatalism as a zombie disease, essentially?
Well, you think about, who wrote the God Delusion? What's that guy's name? Dawkins. Dawkins has this idea of a meme. So a meme sort of can spread, and there are memes that are more transmissible than other memes. So I think antinatalism is a meme. And for a lot of folks, when they get the idea, they seize upon it. And it can be seen as something that infests, or a computer bug that infests your brain. And I just see it as, I'm an anti-natalist, of course, so I do not see it that way, but I could see how other people could see it that way. Right. And yeah, it's a, some type of bug. So,
yeah.
I think one of my titles for the book that I was also thinking about was Atheist Anti-Natalist Zombie Apocalypse.
Love it. That, please make a movie of that title. Somebody. Okay, cool. Thank you.
So from a natalist perspective, they could see this as this is a dangerous idea. This anti-natalism stuff is a really dangerous. Oh my God. Reading all the Christian Science magazine articles about anti-natalism, when they get it all fucked up and they think it's so this is such a dangerous idea. Oh my God. Oh geez. This could be spreading. How do we make arguments against it? How do we stop it? How do we proceed? And it's just assumed that they're not right. Anti-natalism is not a correct idea, right? Immediately, oh, this is dangerous to our ideology. So I like that idea of information or an idea as a virus. Yeah. So I wrote the book too, where I've got some of the narration is tongue in cheek, or some of the narration is, when I'm narrating from Cole's perspective, I'm using a narrator who's sympathetic to Cole. When I'm narrating from Eris's perspective, I'm using a narrator who's sympathetic to Eris, which is way too fucking ambitious to tackle this type of writing as a first-time author. But, what the hell, might as well, get her done.
You pulled it off.
In some ways, way too well, because people accuse me of being a natalist, or etc.
which a couple of people have,
absolutely.
We'll talk a little bit about it in a while. I mean, it's an interesting reaction, I think.
Absolutely.
Cole at one point asks Eris how he expects for anti-natalism not to manifest again on Omelas. And he has this, and Eris has this plan to erase all knowledge after a certain year. Old books are mention of such ideas. And I just love this idea of like somebody trying to edit, the whole sum of human output, creative output, to sort of delete anything in any way antinatally or atheistic or anything like that. But of course, like, won't the fact that life will still suck on Omelas, eventually lead to people thinking this way? I don't know. I think that was such a cool little part of the book. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that whole part?
Oh, absolutely. It's a totally fucking stupid plan from Eris, and he totally doesn't understand anti-natalism, but somebody could, but it's sort of genius in some way too. None of the books, and I'll just purge the literature, and because this is such a simple idea that anybody could have.
Right.
The moment you say, I resent that you had me, to your parents, or hear somebody else say it, boom, there's anti-natalism. It can spontaneously crop up at any time. It's not like a virus you can sufficiently inoculate or knock out in quarantine and get rid of. And besides that, Eris doesn't get the ideas. He's going to bring his precious damn Bible. There's plenty of anti-natalist shit in the Bible. So
yeah, exactly.
Anybody does a reading of the Bible, you're going to see. So, totally stupid idea, but I like the idea too. I think it's an interesting idea when you restart the society. Cut anti-natalism out of it. Yeah, but good luck.
It's just a great concept. I'm glad you worked with that a little bit within the book. I just thought that was so great. I honestly forget, did Eris bring animals along with him to Omelas?
I do not have him bringing animals to Omelas.
Interesting. Okay.
But it's not clear if he did bring some, or if that's a possibility. I never said yes or no.
Okay. Interesting. Was Eris successful? Did he go on to make children on Omelas? Now, before you answer, perfectly fine if that's not another question you want to answer, if you want to keep that secret.
Yes, he made several children on Omelas.
Oh.
And it gets, it's totally horrific, because what he did to Cole.
Yeah.
So yeah, he did his plan. He was successful. He got things done on Omelas.
Tragedy. Well, have you ever thought about perhaps writing that as a sequel?
I'm in the midst of a sequel.
Oh, that's what I wanted to hear. Is there anything you can tell me about it?
Sequel. Some folks, anti-natalism reoccurs on Omelas. They get rid of the Omelas colony. And then some people come back from Omelas. And they go about the real business. I just think that, all the readers might be blown away by the sequel.
I can't wait. Can you tell me anything perhaps about when we could expect to see such a thing?
I wrote the whole draft in 2 months, and I've been in 9 months of editing hell.
Holy shit. Wow. Amazing.
So no, I don't have a release date, and this one's going to be, I think it'll be significantly bigger depending on how much ends up getting cut out.
Okay.
I mean, my editor has no patience with me.
Okay.
He will suggest cuts and slashes, which I always disagree with until I think about them for a day, and then I come back and say, yeah, I agree. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how long it'll take. Well, this is the wonderful thing about being a hobbyist, right?
Uh-huh.
So I could have chosen to try to get a publishing company and try to get some deal. And 9 Banded Books, I think, is the publisher I would have gone with. Just a fucking amazing publisher.
Absolutely.
And who knows, they might have gone with and published. But then, well, we got to get this next book. Are you writing a trilogy? Have you got to do this shit? Oh, you got to do a book tour. You got to do this and that. I'd rather sell, under 100 copies, which I've sold, significantly less than 100 copies of The Last Call for Heroes. This is just a fun little hobby for me. This is an aside, and also I don't have anybody who I can talk to about anti-natalism on a regular basis, so this ends up being sort of a proxy for beating the shit out of friends and family with it.
Sure.
The writing. So there's something coming out, and I've put a ton of work into it. I hope it's as good as the original. But yeah, that's a sequel's in the works. And the working title of the sequel right now is Leave No Trace.
Okay. All right, Connor, I'm so excited to hear that. I cannot wait. That's amazing news. Congratulations. That's great.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. In your opinion, Connor, who are the heroes and villains of Last Call for Heroes? I mean, I expect I know what the answers are, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
The villain is absolutely Eris, but he's also an incredible victim, and everybody's a victim.
Yes.
And I think that if people read it and discuss it, they might start to think heroes and villains is that a short-sighted? It's just one way of looking at the thing.
It's almost too easy. Yeah.
It's almost too easy. I don't think Cole's quite the hero. If there was a hero in the book, it's definitely President Yang, who acknowledges that the great decline is happening and says it's perfectly fine to happen. And so she's the biggest hero. She sees a hero in herself and sees a hero in you. Everyone who's reading the book or listening to the speech in that, can we manage the great decline? And can we treat one another with dignity and respect? And can we leave the earth with dignity? So President Yang's the obvious hero. Eris is the obvious villain. Cole lies somewhere in between. That's my answer. Heroes and villains.
No, I actually agree with that assessment 100%. That's right. That's what I felt coming away from it, was that President Yang was actually the true hero, which is kind of amazing because she's not really referenced that much, but it's so clear that the person with the vision.
She's a footnote. She dies like 100 years before the setting of the book. I think it's a long time before the setting of the book. She dies.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, how do you feel about the ending? Is it happy? Is it tragic for you personally?
Oh, it's tragic. It's the goddamn worst. It's horrible in every way. Yeah, it's total tragedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sets me up nicely for my next book. So
it certainly does.
and I have no mercy for the readers.
I'm glad.
You got to take some tragedy.
True.
So yeah, totally tragic for me personally. Isn't this the worst? And what happens to Cole? Isn't that the freaking worst? How would you like
so
that
sad.
As you're going out?
It's almost so unceremonious. It's like he does deserve better than what he got.
Oh yeah. It's just terrible
tragedy. Yeah. I don't think of either of them, as heroes. I think there are no heroes in the end, except for President Yang, certainly, in a lot of respects. There is only the fact that people are weak and Cole chooses to help his brother, or the whole world has to pay for it. And I really can't blame him in some respects. I end up feeling really bad for him. To quote one of the Amazon.com reviews of Last Call for Heroes, overall, the story creates a nice balance of human interaction, exploration of cultural ideas, technical science details, and descriptions of a future world. And I very much agree with that. It's a really nice, balanced mix of all of these elements. And I don't think that that's an easy thing to do at all. So, just congratulations on that. I think you really did write an excellent and very balanced piece.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's much appreciated.
Yeah. So now I'd like to talk in a little bit more detail about the kind of response Last Call for Heroes received and some of the criticism you got. How do you feel about the kind of response Last Call for Heroes has received, in its sum total? What is your impression of the response?
I think there's a huge mix from highly positive. If you read AK Hunter's review or watch AK Hunter's review on YouTube, oh, what an incredibly nice and super positive review.
Lovely, yeah.
So nice, just lovely, and I really like AK Hunter too. So, what an incredibly nice person, and just a super review. And then, though I had another YouTuber review from Dana, which, holy crap, shocked the hell out of me. And I will admit, like all authors, your baby's ugly. Oh my God, it's just emotionally devastating.
Yeah.
But if I can zoom out a little bit, then isn't this what good art does? You can get some mixed reviews, and even the people who sort of hate it, they kind of have to be obsessed with it, and it makes them think, and it makes them cry, and it makes them read more, and it makes them highlight, and it's just does it. So is there something that says your art needs to be well received? Well, I don't want to make all that type of art. I'd rather make some art that makes people think, and this is the harder art to make. And you say, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna do it.
Absolutely.
Gonna do it my way. So you go for broke. And,
whether they love it, whether they hate it, what you don't want is for people to be disinterested, and that's not what you got.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
So.
One of the criticisms that you received was that this wasn't about anti-natalism. This wasn't about the philosophy. It wasn't some kind of regurgitation of anti-natal rhetoric. I'm not sure why there's some expectation on you that that's what it had to be. I just found that to be such a strange response. But how do you respond to such criticism, and why do you think people would make such a criticism?
I think anti-natalism is, even though it's been around for thousands of years, in terms of the social movement aspect of anti-natalism, it's still in its infancy.
Right.
And I think in its infancy, the first people who sort of get a hold of it or talk about it or work with it are the philosophers.
Yeah.
And I really hate philosophy. I don't think it's a good machine. And I don't like talking to philosophers. And I think philosophers say, to me, holy crap, could you do more mental masturbation? I'm a pragmatic person. I want to think about other aspects of the stuff. So yeah. I don't like most of that stuff. Though when chatting with my nephew about it, he's like, "Oh, well, you're doing philosophy." I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm doing it on my terms.
Right.
I don't have to do philosophy on everybody else's terms." But yeah, the bulk of the works on anti-natalism are books on philosophy or real close to philosophy work. And this is a start of a generation. But the stuff that needs to come after philosophy is other forms of art and other forms of discussions of what are the practical implications? How could all this play out? What's the future going to hold? What happens if this catches on? So these are the themes that I'm really interested in. These are the more pragmatic themes. I don't think they're discussed very much. They're very rarely discussed in the literature. There isn't a lot produced upon them, on them. And eventually, if antinatalism is to flex out of its infancy, baby bird, eventually you got to fly and leave the nest, that some of these books like this need to be written. So sort of my response is I can understand that it isn't about philosophy, and you think every antinatalism book has to be about philosophy. Like you had one guest on your show, and the guests at some point said, I don't think you can really call yourself an antinatalist unless you've read Benatar.
I don't remember who that was, but yeah, I heard that a lot.
That pissed me off so much.
Yeah, it pisses me off
That
too.
pissed me off so much. So is the concept of antinatalism just for the highfalutin philosophers? Do I need a fucking PhD in philosophy to say I'm an antinatalist? Imagine telling slaves you can't be anti-slave until you've read these fucking books.
Yeah.
I mean, totally disgusting. So they may not like me. They may not like my book. They may have this criticism. Well, luckily, we got freedom of speech in this country, and I'm going to write what I'm interested in, and I'm going to want to talk about some of the things that I'm interested in, and I'm not really interested in the philosophy, though I think Benatar is tremendously important. I mean, he's a 10-ton giant to me being a flea in this community. I mean, one of the most important people. So even though I don't really care for philosophy, et cetera, I think, he's tremendously important. I think Inmendum is tremendously important. So I don't denigrate it. I just say it's not my cup of tea. And I want to talk about some other pragmatic things. And this is going to have to happen for antinatalism to go beyond its fledgling status. So
100%.
That's my response to the criticism.
No, very well said. I agree 100% with everything you just said. And I really do think that as time goes on, works like yours, like Last Call for Heroes, that have dared to think about the subject more pragmatically will gain in importance, as works that did dare to do that. And I think that, part of the response is us witnessing sort of a shift that's really, it hits a nerve with a lot of antinatalists. A lot of antinatalists are afraid to ask those questions about sort of the pragmatic side to what we're talking about. But I think it's unethical to not talk about the pragmatic. So, I mean, I just don't think it's ethical to talk about antinatalism and not, eventually discuss the sort of pragmatic side. So, but yeah, I think that is one of the reasons why the response was so polarized. Another criticism was that it's just simply not long enough and didn't go into enough detail about how this world came to be. I wasn't bothered by that personally, and especially hearing you talk about the process of writing it. It did start out as a much longer thing, and this is sort of the curated, version of it. But certainly there are those details, like the story of President Yang, that I would love to know, more about. So just out of curiosity, do you have an interest in perhaps, going back and writing the backstory of Last Call for Heroes at some point?
Not at this point, but right now I'm neck deep in the quagmire of a sequel.
Yeah.
So holy crap, it's that's mind exploding. So no, my answer is no. I'll never, how many times have I said I'll never do X, and then I'm never doing that again. Jesus, and then they're doing the same thing next year. So who knows what the future will hold? I just don't think it's all that interesting. So this is the other thing, as an author hobbyist, the wonderful thing is, I don't answer to a publisher. I don't answer to anybody. I can write it exactly how I want. And you could argue that, you want a little more backstory. You're so interested. Well, isn't this kind of a good book too, where, it's cut down to I guess, having degrees in mathematics, is like, the other thing is I like to condense. I like to cut and condense. So,
Yeah.
like Gauss's PhD thesis, I think, was 13 pages, where
Okay.
he shows the, certain, shows you can't bisect the angle with the compass and straight edge, so it's common, and one of my ilk to pound it down. So yeah, it's only 100 less than 100 pages, but so somebody reads it, you may find that you could read it twice and still get something out of it. It's not it's not thin material. I don't think it's hard to read, but I don't know. Who knows? I may write more on this, and my sequel is actually the third in the trilogy. So I'm talking about when they come back from Omelas. I don't spend any time talking about their time, what happens when Eris gets to Omelas.
Okay.
And Omelas, of course, is a trick that Cole plays on Eris, because Eris asks what he should name the planet, and Cole suggests Omelas, though Omelas is I won't give that one, but that's another, I'm sure, one of your 12
I think I get you. Yeah. Absolutely. Right.
So right. I'm writing the third in a potential trilogy. Yeah. So sorry.
That's very exciting. No. I love that.
Yep.
That's great. Well, no, I certainly don't think you have to write a backstory, but no, that was a very good answer. Another criticism you received is that some people thought that your book was misogynistic. I gotta say, I didn't see that at all in this book. I thought that was a totally, out of thin air, made out of nothing kind of accusation from this book. I mean, I don't remember Ben's wife's name, but she's Wendy. One of the strongest. Mindy, is that what it? Yeah, she's one of the strongest. Wendy, Wendy, sorry.
Yeah,
she's one of the strongest characters in the whole book, I thought. And President Yang is a woman, so I just don't really understand where that criticism came from. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Fiona's strong too.
Fiona, yes, absolutely. Sorry, I forgot about her.
So the main characters are men. Well, unfortunately, I'm a man too, so I sort of write.
Right, what you know.
What I want, what I know, but I think the misogyny criticism comes from the idea that if you chastise or make a woman a villain for having birth, that it's totally screwed up because you aren't giving equal responsibility as an anti-natalist for the bad decision. So it takes two to make a child, and both of them, in my opinion, are equally responsible. In most cases, though, in cases where sperm stolen from the father, I don't think the father shares equal responsibility. And in the cases where the mother's raped and then doesn't have access to abortion or something like that, I don't think she shares much of the moral responsibility from an anti-natalist perspective for having the child. So it's not always 50-50. Well, some of this comment was that, because I never really held men accountable, but in my opinion, Eris and Cole's father is one of the most reprehensible villains in the entire book, because at least their mother was a zealot. So at least she had drank the damn Kool-Aid. The dad was beating the children for the mother, and he didn't even believe in the religion. As soon as the mother died, then he trails off. I never really believed in that. Well, why the hell were you beating the kids and abusing the kids? At least the mom was a zealot. And between a zealot and a charlatan, I have a little bit more sympathy for the zealot. They've drank the Kool-Aid. They're just on the wrong path. The charlatan has ill intent. So I think there's some of that. And the other comment made was that to be misogynistic was that don't you realize that it was tone deaf and misogynistic, because didn't I realize that in other places in the world there are forced child brides? So this would be on the end where the women bear little or no response. If you're forced to be a child bride, then and the comment was they're essentially raping children, and I'm tone deaf not to have that included in my book. So is it misogynistic not to include sufficient child rape? Well, it could also be an artistic or a shocking decision where you don't really want to include that. And sort of, there's, I think there's plenty of acknowledgement, but you can't say, a book's endorsing something if they don't include that section. So how can you pillory a book because of what they don't include? How can you say it's misogynistic for what you don't include? So there's the famous book, The Rape of Nan King, where they talk about the atrocities visited upon the Chinese by the Japanese in World War II. That book's not endorsing the Nazis.
Right.
You could say, well, they never included anything about the Nazi atrocities, so they're endorsing the Nazi atrocities. No, it's just narrow in focus.
Right.
And this, to me, is the other thing. In the modern setting, critics will accuse your book of being, various books of being misogynistic or racist or this and that, and there's just no defense. That it's such a damaging accusation, and in this case, I don't think it was. I don't think it was done with good evidence.
I don't either.
And it's such an unpleasant and damaging accusation, especially for a book that, and there should be some, in my opinion, it may be, prudent to do some careful reading of the book.
I
and
agree.
Making sure that these accusations are founded before you make them, because you can't really defend them, and they're just so damaging. So I think these claims should not be unleashed, so quickly.
I agree. No, I agree. I think it's indefensible and does not represent the work that you've created at all. So you've also been criticized for using authoritarian themes, and yes, to some extent you do, but I mean, the authoritarians really aren't that authoritarian in Last Call for Heroes. I mean, it's an anti-natalist world that's been won essentially bloodlessly, so it seems. So what do you think about that criticism?
I think authoritarian themes have a proud tradition in science fiction, and
absolutely,
and so it's to some extent it's an homage to other books with solid authoritarian themes. I mean,
I almost don't know how you write
some of this stuff,
a sci-fi story without authoritarian themes. It just seems like the bread and butter of that genre.
So yeah, it's a proud tradition, and yes, I have authoritarian themes, and no, I don't apologize for the authoritarian themes, and no, I'm not required to write the anti-natalists in some pretty or friendly or light. I can write them the way I choose, and I don't think and also it has to do with how I wrote the book, where the narrator is sympathetic to the main character who I'm focusing on. So in some cases, the different views of situations and things that had happened are viewed extremely authoritarian by Eris, and they're not viewed as very authoritarian at all by Cole. And isn't this similar to our reality? So
exactly.
How about for separatists within the United States, where their children are forced to go to school? You can see articles on both sides where somebody's saying, oh, the state's so damn authoritarian, and articles on the other side saying, no, the kids have to fucking go to school because it's a huge disservice to human beings if they don't have a chance to go to or homeschool or something with an education and a curriculum, right?
Exactly.
Dental care, all right? Aren't the kids, entitled to dental care? So the separatists have this ability. So yeah, it's viewed very differently depending on your view. And yeah, so they write kids' books. I mean, the authoritarian themes are a lot more significant in, what's that, Catching Fire or the Hunger Games series.
Yeah, that's true.
There, you want to talk about some serious authoritarian themes. So I think my authoritarian themes are quite mild, and
I agree.
Yeah, so that's my response.
Well, I know it's a great response. I also think that they're quite mild and appropriate for the genre, certainly. Speaking a little bit more towards the authoritarian themes, regarding your version of CPS and the insinuation that it was so terrible and authoritarian, the way that you'd written about it, I just sort of feel like Eris should have been removed from the situation that he was in. He was in an abusive situation to the extent to which that, like, I think CPS in our world now would have removed him from that situation. He was being abused. He was being shielded from society. He was being deprived of an education. This is, yeah. So I just, that also surprised me as a criticism, because to read what Eris was essentially going through in his home life, and to not call that a situation that he needed to be rescued from, just seems really short-sighted. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think it's kind of funny. It was kind of funny and a little bit of a joke to me to make CPS the most powerful, dangerous, feared three-letter agency.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, kind of funny. And yeah, but this also comes back to, what's your opinion? I think that, yeah, separation from the parents is sort of should be a last resort, though these kids weren't separated from the parents. They're just forced to do an 8-hour day or however many hour day at school.
Right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. They came home afterwards.
They came home afterwards. They aren't forced for a full separation. So I don't think it's that extreme. And I think the worst thing, worse than the CPS taking the kids, is what was happening to the kids at home.
Exactly. That's kind of my point.
This is sort of my opinion. But the other thing is, it seems that some people read the book assuming that I agree with all the decisions that are being made by all the characters in the book, right, and that I agree with all the dialogue that all the characters say, which is ridiculous because they're on opposite sides.
Right.
I don't necessarily endorse the dialogue. Somebody writes whoever wrote Silence of the Lambs doesn't necessarily agree with the stuff Hannibal Lecter does. Right.
Right.
So there's in some sense, like, oh, geez, am I a monster? Am I a misogynist for having some misogynist characters, of which Eris is? No. And does that mean I'm it's misogynistic writing because I have misogynistic characters? Well, it starts getting a little bit subtle at that point, right?
Yeah.
There may be some misogynistic writing, but it may be on purpose for an artistic effect and doesn't necessarily mean that the author is a misogynist. And, you could say this is hair splitting, but in my opinion, it's the sort of delicate and nuanced part of writing nuanced fiction and reading it and interpreting it. So, yeah, that's...
No, well said. There's a feeling amongst some of your critics that the way you're portraying antinatalism is a way that does not endorse antinatalism, because children are forced to learn antinatalism is just not really that true of your characters. And this is a conversion that's not happening by choice, and that seems authoritarian. I think education is always an imposition, but it's an important one. You can't not educate a child, and these kids in the story are being taught critical thinking. They are not forced to be antinatalists. They can have children if they wish. So I think that's a very I didn't agree with that criticism either. I thought you wrote it rather carefully, to honestly, to not insinuate that. So yes, they are forced to learn, but they really aren't being forced to be something or to agree with this antinatalist world. I mean, that is correct, right?
Yeah, they're still allowed to think, right? You're forced to learn, but you're still allowed to think. So you may hold whatever opinions you want. I mean, and this goes along with amendment that children have the right to information.
Right.
Well, this is fraught with danger too. So when we teach history is written by the victors, and history books are altered to follow certain ideologies. And a huge portion of modern school is indoctrination, if not the bulk is indoctrination. I mean, the whole school system
exactly
indoctrinated to make factory workers. And if you don't sit still, then you got ADD and we'll pump you full of fucking Ritalin, instead of saying, well, maybe when, we were cavemen or working out on the plains on deer or shit, the kids were allowed to run around a little bit. No, you got to sit in your fucking seat for 6-7 hours a day as a 5-year-old. You run around or display some of this behavior, then there's something wrong with the kids, right? Nobody can ever say, oh, no, maybe there's something a little bit wrong with the society. So these are themes also, themes. Of course, you can't tell I'm cursing and frothing at the mouth, so you can't tell I'm, rather opinionated about these themes. But yeah, they bleed into my writing. And absolutely, in educating children, you can't ever be truly free of imposition, because you'll have your own biases. The teachers have their own biases. They have the way they look at the world. They have their own understanding of history, politics, etc. I think that's something, interestingly enough, I think that's something our nation is struggling with enormously right now.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, look at Independence Day. Independence Day, July 4th, coming right up, but that was just independence for the wealthy white male landowners,
Exactly.
right? The rest of the nation was pretty much fucked. So, I like Juneteenth. Yeah, when the slaves were freed, then okay, now we're a little more even, right? Yeah. We're a little more even as a nation. So, in my opinion, Independence Day, I'm like, move it to June 19th and just cancel July 4th.
Fuck yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Man. Yeah. Were we really? Well, we were independent from the British. It's really an important part of our United States history. Yeah, as written by the same old fuckers, man. Yeah, so they dictate it. Oh, yeah, great. So, it's education is never truly free of imposition, but
exactly,
there are various levels of indoctrination. So when you have to recite oaths and take creeds and sign shit, then that's sort of crossing over to the indoctrination. If you're just given information and techniques to think, you're taught logical fallacies, critical thinking, and you're taught history, then it's not, that's a little better, right?
Absolutely.
Taught some math, taught some critical thinking, taught some fallacies, this type of thing. And then you say, oh, make your own decisions. We teach a man to fish, or, caught a fish, whatever.
Should the people of the world be so lucky as to be imposed to have that quality of education? I mean, seriously.
I think education as represented in Last Call for Heroes is, many steps up from our current education system.
I think I'd have to agree with you on that. It could possibly be a bit of a criticism to say that the fact that there is less authoritarianism in Last Call for Heroes and not more authoritarianism in the book is unrealistic of what a real antinatal world would be and look like. There were no apparent rebellions, no apparent wars. But if there had been a rebellion and wars and all this stuff, and if that had been the way that you'd written the book, I just the criticisms that of people that voiced this kind of thing would be filled with even more anxiety about the way that you're supposedly casting this bad light on antinatalism. So it's just, I guess this question is more to do with like, I'm not sure what people want, I'm not sure what people, I really thought a lot about that, when I read it and just hearing people's criticisms in this kind of regard. It's like, how do people want it represented? I don't know. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
I think the future is hard to predict.
Yeah.
Especially before it happens. The future is much more easy to predict when it's already occurred.
Yeah.
But it's pretty hard to predict before it happened, and that's why we can't get stock markets or any of that shit right. So who knows what the hell it's going to be. So I wrote one vision.
Right.
And by me writing this vision, again, as fiction, I get a better out than having written an essay. So if somebody writes an essay, this is what I believe the future is going to be, then they're held to some extent to a higher standard. Fiction, all bets are off. This is one way I see things happening. And I don't even say in the book whether I think this is the most likely or not. A lot of the creative choices I've made are to write the type of book I want to write.
Yeah.
And a type of book I think people might read or resonate with. Do I think it'd actually be this peaceful? Well, I think we're entering into the Great Decline already. So I don't think anti-natalists may play an enormous role. I mean,
it's true.
How do we stop population? Well, this is an easy goddamn cocktail according to science. You take your tumbler and you pour in 1 cup of education for women and 1 cup of access to birth control. And now you've got a cocktail that will cause the Great Decline. And can people argue that, oh, no, we got to deprive women from education? Oh, no, we got to deprive women from access to birth control? I mean, any civilized person is going to have to say, no, everybody's entitled to some of that cocktail. So,
Yeah.
like Emendham often says, anti-natalists have already won. So do I think this is realistic? Hell no, I don't. I don't know what the fuck's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you go back to the early environmentalists, and you got a few environmentalists, and everybody thinks, what the fuck are you? They say, maybe we shouldn't be cutting down every goddamn tree in the forest. And the establishment says, what the fuck are you talking about? They didn't even understand. Maybe we shouldn't be damming up all the rivers. What is this fucking idiot? They don't even argue with the people. They just stand back and, you know, in wonderment of how stupid the early environment. But now we say, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't fuck the planet. And only some of us have come around, right?
Right.
Only some of us have come around. Yeah, maybe a little bit of environmentalism is a good thing. Oh yeah, yeah, no shit. So who knows what happens with anti-natalism? And I don't know if this is the way that it's going to go.
Right, right.
But the Great Decline is sure as hell coming.
Yeah.
And economies and governments and people are going to have to figure out how to deal with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And the other thing is, if somebody else thinks that AN is anti-natalism or the future with anti-natalism is going to happen some other way, I highly encourage them to write your own book or article or whatever.
I agree. I agree. Yeah.
And I could certainly write another one where it's a different thing, right? Because this is not necessarily what I believe. I'm not prognosticating in this work. It's a piece of fiction.
Right. Well, I was going to say this a little later, but I'm going to say it now. Your intention clearly was not to create some kind of political manual on extinction. It's a book. It's a novella. It's a story, and I just don't understand this desire to critique it through that kind of lens. You know, so yeah.
I don't think people have anything else, right? There is not enough of these other discussions. There aren't enough of these essays saying, is there a manual for human extinction?
Nope. Not that I know of.
Is there an anti-natalist manual for human extinction? Hey, this is how we should do. And there are some ideas in the book you could probably draw off of. So I think that reading Last Call for Heroes, if you wanted to write such a book, I'd highly suggest. And of course, I'm biased because I wrote it. But yeah, to write something like a manual for human extinction through anti-natalism, yeah, that'd be another thing. But it's different than what I wrote. But I think this is another example that anti-natalists are so starved for media that their projections of what they'd really like to be reading get projected on Last Call for Heroes. And Last Call for Heroes may not be what they really want to read, but what they really want to read may not exist. Last Call for Heroes was what I really wanted to write.
Yeah.
And luckily that's the prerogative of an author.
Well, this may be a bit of a rhetorical question, although certainly if you have any thoughts on it, but just speaking to what you just said, to quote one of the Amazon.com reviews, I do not think this novel is an appropriate depiction of anti-natalism. What is an appropriate depiction of anti-natalism supposed to look like? What do you theorize they might think of as an appropriate depiction? And again, I really do think that's an important question people need to ask themselves, because it does seem really like any prediction of what that world would look like is just met with a lot of anxiety and fear. And yeah, I don't know. Do you have any extra thoughts on that?
Yeah, the Amazon reviewer got it wrong. It's a novella instead of a novel.
That's true.
To split hairs, and I think the copies I sent you don't have a novella on the cover.
No, it does.
It does. Okay, great.
Novella. Yep.
Last Call for Heroes, a novella. It's just a little thing, and yeah, how can you tell an author they did something, they inappropriately depicted anti-natalism? What the fuck is an inappropriate depiction of anti-natalism?
Yeah.
I mean, have we got thought police or something around there? I mean, you can depict in fiction. In fiction, you may really depict anti-natalism however you'd like to.
Right.
Appropriateness sort of applies is a do you have a panel on appropriateness? It's sort of a subjective term, right? So what what is an appropriate depiction of antinatalism supposed to look like? Well, don't talk to more than one antinatalist, or you're going to get differing views on what an appropriate depiction of antinatalism is.
Right.
So this is another, comment or accusation I'm entirely unable to defend. Appropriate for what audience? I don't know. And what do I theorize somebody might think of as an appropriate depiction? I can't, because I'm stuck in my own tiny mind. To me, this was seemed like a reasonable depiction. And a depiction of antinatalism, well, if antinatalism is just the knowledge that it's wrong to bring sentient creatures into existence, then I think it's a reasonable depiction of antinatalism. Did the reviewer, he or she, mean appropriate depiction of an antinatalist future? I don't know. It's just too cryptic. Yeah, I'm not sure. Could I throw that back? What do you think an appropriate depiction of antinatalism would be?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, this podcast has been really traumatic, I think, for a lot of people, because a lot of people have realized through the course of listening to all the episodes that antinatalism is not one thing. It's a lot of different, the core of it we can all kind of agree on, that baby bad or birth bad, but all of the surrounding, details, like very few of us can agree on anything. So there's that, there is the fact. And I think also because we are at the beginning of antinatalist art, people producing art around the subject of antinatalism, like you're gonna get examples of all of these, very divergent interpretations. But I think we all, I think, have our very personally strict views of what it is, or what we'd like it to be, or how we'd like other people to think of it. I am an ethicist, and I'm a sentiocentric antinatalist. So I do kind of like recoil a little bit, part of me does, at suggestions that antinatalism is only for human beings. That's not to say that stories or that deal with only humans are bad or wrong or something. I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form. But, I want people to have that conversation of what, sentient extinction looks like. It blows my mind that so much antinatalism does come from a religious background. It comes from all these other different, people have all kinds of different motivations, and some of which just, are completely alien to me. So I want people to, in my heart of hearts, I want people to be able, at the very least, to have a conversation about anti-procreation, antinatalism from the perspective of sentient beings, to not leave out, anything that can feel. I think that is the true subject.
Absolutely, I agree.
And I also want people to be challenged, by this thing that you've done with Last Call for Heroes, of what does this look like if it is to be a reality? How does sentient extinction happen? How does extinction happen? How do you do it as ethically as possible? Is it possible to do it, more ethically than this or more ethically than that? I think those are works of about antinatalism that deal with all of those, ethical conundrums or ethical questions that are really difficult and really controversial. Like, that's, for me, that's like the true subject for me. But that doesn't mean that I don't adore different kinds of interpretations of it. Like, I personally feel like I am pretty welcoming of different ways of presenting it, or different ways of thinking about it. And I think that, but again, I mean, that's kind of why with Anti-Natalism International, like, I've wanted it to be really big tent. I want different anti-natalist, anti-procreative perspectives to talk to each other, and to sort of work through our differences, if that's possible. That maybe was a very long-winded, and hopefully got to some a bit of an answer to your question.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think that's great. To me, You know, like the only folks I'd want to leave out of the tent are eugenicists.
Yes, I agree with you on that completely. Yeah.
You know, but actually that's not terribly true. There may be some others I'd want to leave out of the tent as well. But that's one group I know I'd want to leave out of the tent. I would even welcome the religious who say we shouldn't stick
I do too.
people in hell. Those people to me are welcome. They're part of a, you know, I feel some brotherly or whatever.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that.
You know, they're part of us. Yeah.
I think to some degree we're at the minute kind of going, well, you're in the tent. Who's in the tent? Like, you know, we're still trying
Absolutely.
to still trying to do like a roll call almost.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, you know, there are people that don't think I should be in the tent. I mean, there's certainly people that don't think Efilism should be in that tent. I vehemently, no pun intended, disagree with them. But yeah, I think those disagreements are really important. And I think let that be, and I've been criticized for saying this, but let that be a battlefield of ideas. You know, let's hash that out. I think that's the most important thing. One of the most important things that we can do as anti-procreative thinkers at this stage of the game is to at least be able to talk about that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And me writing and publishing Last Call for Heroes is meant as potentially a guidepost or a talking point or a starting point where people can start bringing up some of these topics.
Yes.
You know, it's a potential jumping off point. It's one little piece of, I hesitate to call it literature, writing that exists.
Literature. Yeah.
And then I'd also like to say that, you know, the Amazon review where the person said, I do not think this novel is an appropriate depiction of antinatalism. I have no obligation in a novella to appropriately depict antinatalism.
You most certainly do not. No.
Again, fiction, science fiction is held to the least highest standard. It is not peer reviewed. Yeah. The author may write as they wish. The reader may, though I'm glad the Amazon reviewer posted the review. I think it's very interesting. And this is exactly what I wanted out of the book. So this is a dream come true. You and I can talk about the book and talk about some of these subjects. It's a jumping off point for some, for some bigger topics of discussion. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the height of my aspirations.
I think a review like that, I think at the end of the day, even though it might be difficult, you should take it as a bit of a compliment, because I think it is evidence that you have hit a nerve, and that nerve is something that I've talked about for a long time, which is the amount of fear that is in antinatalism about our own philosophy, and people want it represented one way because if it's represented in a way that is, I think, as controversial as the subject is, then people want to, again, people delete, 80% of the people that submit a video to the contest delete their video.
Right.
I think because there is all of this fear, and once people sort of realize just how controversial some of the questions being asked are in this subject, then people like to jump ship. And so again, it doesn't surprise me for that reason why the responses would be so polarized, for that reason alone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree. It can be an easy book. It's probably much harder for anti-natalists to read this book than it is for natalists. Natalists, find this easy to consume. It's the anti-natalists, don't like it, or, it strikes a negative nerve or something. Oh yeah, you got to be very, very careful, which I can totally understand. Along with Efilism, you got to be very, very careful about how you talk about it and how you think about it and what the implications are. Yeah. It's a deep and somewhat scary subject.
Yeah, yeah. Well, another comment from the Amazon.com reviewer. Strangely, he does not deliver any counter arguments other than religious one. Now, I don't agree that this is true of Last Call for Heroes, but I think it is fair to say, and I don't mean to speak for you, that there was a conscious decision on your part to focus on atheism versus religion.
Absolutely.
And I actually really applaud you for that. I think the emphasis you placed on atheism was very meaningful and highlighted atheism in a way that I think about a lot. Atheism is a kind of gateway drug towards antinatalism, which I think, which I'm kind of shocked people don't realize that it is. Did you have any extra thoughts on that?
Yeah, you don't. If you do the Venn diagram, atheist and anti-natalist will find people in all.
I think so. Yeah.
In all areas of that Venn diagram. So it's not necessary, but to me, it flows pretty naturally. And I think Eris delivered a number of pretty decent counter arguments.
Yeah.
At least as good as most of the natalist crap I've seen on YouTube. Yeah, you can't beat. Actually, I'm saying you can't beat the argument. If somebody beat the argument, so you could switch me back to natalist if you give me a good freaking argument.
Yeah, sure.
I just don't think there is one out there. So I think I'm like, true blue, dunked in the water, born again, anti-natalist, and I just don't think it's going away.
Yeah.
You convince me though, nail a good argument, and I'll be on that side. But it's hard for me to make a good argument, a good natalist argument, because I don't think there are any. So right. I did my very best, and even though you don't have to be an atheist to be anti-natalist, I think oftentimes they come up together. And because a lot of the religious edicts, and I think religion really is the virus.
Yes.
Because
exactly.
a little religious town, say they go through some type of horrific plague or something, they can always hold out a little, well, God will save us, or some good stuff will happen. So I think there might be an evolutionary, advantage to holding these myths. Or who the hell knows, but it's just not true.
Yeah.
It's just not true. And I think skeptics and stuff, they had to be pretty damn careful or they got killed. So the people who were skeptical of the religion or myth, probably the witch doctor had them sacrificed or whatever over the years. So maybe it's been bred out a little bit, like, traits in a dog or whatever. I don't really know. I guess I might be, going too far, but I think it's very common. Yeah. I think that if you looked at atheists and anti-natalists from a statistical perspective, that you would see a strong correlation between those two beliefs.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But I have no scientific basis for that, and luckily I didn't need it. But I think they're quite connected.
Yeah.
If you go away from the books with the edicts of be fruitful, multiply, then if you can question some of this stuff, then antinatalism is a little closer in reach.
Yeah. Well, next, I wrote this whole long thing, so I'm going to read it out, and I promise I'll get to a question in just a bit. But I just want to say that, in my opinion, based on some of the stuff you were talking a little bit about before this, you don't owe anyone making a book a certain way or representing AN a certain way. You shouldn't have that pressure on you, and anti-natalist artists in general shouldn't have that pressure on them. And I wish people would realize that. I think the part of the response to Last Call for Heroes, as I was saying before, has tapped into the anxiety I think a lot of ANs have about the consequences of their own philosophy. And some of that anxiety is certainly for good reason, and some of it isn't. And I think some of the response you've received taps into how afraid anti-natalists are of anti-natalism at the end of the day. And nothing does that more than projected glimpses of a possible anti-natalist future. The fact of the matter is, in my opinion, controlled, well-engineered extinction is not talked about enough. It's not properly conceptualized by nearly anyone. There's a huge resistance in doing so. And I think that's a huge mistake. It's not something that we should be afraid to talk about. And incidentally, this is where even I get a little frustrated with red button talk. It would be great in a lot of ways if this was just something that, you could do quick and easy, which is like sort of the value of the red button in my opinion. But that's probably not what's going to happen, if it happens at all. And I think hopefully it would be this sort of planned, well-engineered, phased extinction. And that's quite, if it does happen, I mean, I think that's what I would most hope would be the case. And I think that if this has some possibility of being a reality, it's something that we must talk about now. I think that we have no possibility of doing it well if we don't start having this conversation today. And I think it's unethical, honestly, to voice antinatalism if we're going to be unwilling to ask those questions and if we're going to be unwilling to have that conversation. I think, anyway. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think it's fine to voice anti-natalism and say this is a truth, even if we don't know how to accomplish it, or it's
of course, yeah.
I think we should be willing. I mean, it's like preaching to the Pope, talking to you about some of these. I just entirely agree, and this is why I'm writing this book, and the book is even bigger than anti-natalism, like I've mentioned, because the Great Decline's. It's already happening.
Right, exactly.
When does the Earth's population top out? 2030, 2050? Well, we're going to have to figure out some shit. And it's probably good to look to the Japanese and the Koreans and the Italians and some of the other societies in which, rates are below reproduction. But maybe some engineers and some smart people should talk about
exactly
how do we do controlled, well-engineered extinction?
But and just to clarify, I'm in no way saying that an antinatalist work has to deal with those subjects.
Sure.
But just that if the attitude is going to be that we never can, that's where I think it's a mistake. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's just good to socialize it among us. Good that we're having some of these conversations.
Yeah, exactly.
And how fucked up are the economists when they say, "Oh, population's declining. This is just gonna fuck everything. There's no possible solution." If you read Wall Street Journal, The Economist, other areas, there's no possible solution to a society if their population starts to decline. Every economic theory and all this is built on endless growth. And how fucking irresponsible is that?
Yeah.
Like exponential growth, and then if we don't leave the planet, eventually we're packed in here like rats. And sort of the implication is that the economists will die and our generation will die and we owe nothing to the next generation, which is the entire complaint of a lot of us anti-natalists, is no respect and nothing's been given to the next generation. Right. And the natalists say, you don't owe shit to those who don't exist yet. Well, that's a pretty ugly thought. We don't owe anything to those who don't exist yet. So if there was a murderer who put a bomb in a nursery, say 10 months before the timer, and blew up all the babies, you'd say, well, that's not an unethical act because he didn't know shit to those people who were going to occur later. No, it's a terribly unethical act to put a bomb in a nursery and have those kids, those kids don't exist yet. Those babies don't exist, but it's a terrible unethical act to put a bomb in a nursery with a 10-month timer. It's going to be new babies in there, but we owe something to those who don't exist. We shouldn't be doing global warming. We shouldn't fuck the planet. And economists some dirty economist should be thinking, so what could we do if a population declines? And a population declining, you could have the GDP decline too, but it doesn't have to be a necessary decline of the GDP per capita. So there's ways to start thinking of this and this type of thing, but nobody serious has started. That's not true. I don't know. There probably are some economists who say this is what we need to figure out, and there are probably bureaucrats in Japan, and I know there are bureaucrats and people in Korea who are thinking, oh, what the fuck? Every year our schools have less and less students. We got to shut some of these down and accommodate the new students. And what implications does the inverse population pyramid have? But this is going to be on us one way or another. And I'm just a tiny author. I'm just a tiny human being. I'm not even probably playing in the most important parts of the Great Decline, which are the bureaucrats and city managers and mayors who are actually dealing with this shit. But it's something anti-natalists need to talk about too.
I agree. Well, this is another big thing that I just got to read. Just in response to some of the criticism I've heard of Last Call for Heroes, I don't think your book does damage to the community, and I just want to say that. I think the world you created in Last Call for Heroes is an antinatal world where things have gone really rather quite well. It's really a picture of a lot of what I would hope would actually occur, a fully engineered, thoughtful extinction phased carefully. Now, it does seem that in this world, sentiocentric antinatalism has failed. There's no plan to end nature, it seems. Vehement, the voluntary human extinction movement, Vehement, has won in the end. Cole is not a filthy ethylist. I think the most depressing thing about the whole book for me was that conversation Cole had with Fiona, that there's still this argument and disagreement happening between essentially antinatalism and ethylism. Like, here we are about to go extinct, and still people are arguing about the agreements and disagreements between anthropocentric and sentiocentric antinatalism. But that just like made me want to like shoot myself in the head. Why did you make the decision to leave out the rest of sentience from your extinction in Last Call for Heroes?
If we can't solve the ethylism problem, then I still don't think it's terrible. I still think we may be obligated to stop reproducing.
At least solve the human problem.
Yeah, so you say, are we going to be able to stop are we going to be able to stop sentient being reproduction on the whole Earth? And then if we can't, do we need to keep the human race around? No, I say, the practicalities mean if we can't stop sentience altogether, at least we can do it for ourselves. That's the least we can do. Mm-hmm. Okay, you make a little step. At least you take humans out of the equation. And unfortunately, crocodiles might develop. Who knows what animals develop brains, and then they got to deal with their own fucking problems. We've done it. So I don't think the existence of if we don't have a solution for ethylism, in my opinion, we should still stop reproducing humans. The lack of an answer. I'm sorry, I'm going around this so much in my head, but what I really want to say about this is a lack of an answer for ethylism doesn't mean it's moral to procreate for humans.
Okay. Yeah.
So natural.
No, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So a natural end could certainly be, we've done it for humans, but many other sentient animals are still around, and they have the potential to create another human type race, though it's plenty tragic just that all the rest of the animals are around. But also, so I think human-based like atheism is a gateway drug to AN. Mm-hmm. I think AN's a nice stopping point. Okay, stop, take a break, and have a cup of tea. Your mind went to atheism, then your mind went to AN for humans, and then maybe the next phase of your journey is to ethylism. And as that, perhaps Last Call for Heroes is that, the little, okay, you can get into AN that way. And also, there's a sequel. So, this is not this may be the end of the book, but it's not the end of the series.
Right, exactly.
So there'll be plenty of surprises in the next book.
I can't wait. I think where the book is most successful is in this thing that you did, the opening up of the conversation for the viewer of who the hero is, who is the villain. It makes it so much more interesting to newer audiences. And honestly, I really could see this almost being like a young adult piece of fiction, or like high schoolers reading this and being encouraged to discuss that point and all the points of the book. In one of the interviews you did after the release of Last Call for Heroes, you made a comment that Last Call for Heroes is a book club book, which I loved as a concept. I think I really get that based on what you said, and I really can see that. A perfect book for a group discussion about who the hero is and who the villains are. Do you have any plans to do something like that? Like, I could really see, doing like a Zoom reading group with like a bunch of antinatalists and whoever else, and opening up that kind of discussion. I mean, you should. I mean, if you have any interest in doing such a thing, I really think you should.
I'm way too lazy and introverted to have any interest in that, and that sounds like work associated with the book.
It's fair enough.
So no, I'd of course recommend somebody to do that out of their own volition and their own time and power, but I don't currently have plans to do something like that, unfortunately.
Fair enough. I'd rather you write more anyway. So yeah,
and I'd be happy to participate. Yeah, absolutely. Somebody else comes up with the idea, great.
Well, maybe we'll have to do that at some point. So just a couple of end things. I really want to thank you, first of all. I know I've taken a lot of your time today, so thank you so much for this. I really do appreciate it, Connor. I wanted to briefly mention that you do have a YouTube channel, Google Sucks.
Google is evil. But
Google is evil. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah. Why did I say Google sucks?
Thinking life sucks.
Probably. Yeah, I got life sucks on the brain. So Google is evil. My apologies. Which you sometimes use to make comments from, and you do have some videos there. Really interesting stuff. I think you may have answered some of this already, so I apologize. But sure. Do you have any plans to make some anti-natalist videos down the road?
I don't really like making YouTube videos. I hate the sound of my voice. I don't like the way I look. I don't like any of the stuff. So YouTube videos I've tried, and it's not really my medium. So no, I'm not going to make any videos on anti-natalism or any of the stuff because I don't like I love to consume YouTube, but I don't like it as a medium for creation, except your damn Anti-natalist Contest. So you booked me in. And now I'm going to have to do a video for it. I mean, it's pretty cool.
That's how I get you.
I don't understand that plan, Am I part of a weird pyramid scheme? I don't understand. So I am going to have to do, if I can, I might make a YouTube. But I might run out of creative steam. And if I run out of creative steam on a project, I have no problem walking away. So no promises for YouTube.
That's okay. That's more than fair. What do your friends, family, and coworkers think about your belief in anti-natalism? Is it something that you share with them? I mean, I know you spoke a little bit about this before, but.
Well, I got to be quite protective of my belief, and to be ethical, I don't want to inflict that or beat the shit out of somebody, right? So there are various, if there's a baby, then I pretend my wife's pregnant. Oh, okay, that's, good news or whatever. I'm not gonna, can't really. I mean, I just don't want to, it doesn't do any good to proselytize, and I hate it from religious folks, and I don't think us anti-natalists should be doing. There's a time and a place, and you just aren't going to make there's no headway done that way. Sometimes you have to preach to the choir. So in terms of proselytization or in terms of forwarding the movement, I got to do it in little ways like this podcast and writing my little books, writing my little stuff, that's the best I can do. But, I've shared it to some extent. I've got a family member, a brother who I'm real close to, who is always so generous as a sounding board. I can chat with him a little bit, and he's always so patient. He may be reading the newspaper or something, but, I can't really tell because his Zoom resolution is so bad. So, I mean, that's so nice. It's so nice to pretend to be interested. So, and then let's see. Coworkers, I do not press this thing. It just, you get it or you don't. Right. Oh my God. It can be oppressive. And then family. So I did have a chat with my mom and dad about this when my anti-natalism was in its infancy. And I said to my dad, I never really, you couldn't have gotten consent. So I never consented to being born. And my dad said, well, you can't really consent because you don't exist yet. Yeah, but I didn't consent, and I kind of wish you had stopped having children before you had me.
Yeah.
And my dad said, well, I've got a 38, and I'll just let me go grab this pistol, and I'll shoot you in the head, and I'll just end it. And he got up to go get the pistol, but I said, Dad, no, I really don't care to be shot in the head. Now that I'm here, I think I'll try to do another year or two at least. And I'd prefer you don't kill me. And I don't think two wrongs make a right. Like, you can't resolve the damage done to bringing me in without my consent by killing me.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I just don't know how I can help you then. And there was a bit of flippancy. I don't know if he would have killed me, but with my dad, you, you never know. He certainly might have. And then my mom, I've chatted with this about this too, and said, I don't, I'm not that resentful because there's a level of indoctrination that you had, etc.
Yeah.
And she read the book and said she really enjoyed Last Call for Heroes.
Oh, good.
And she's got she has some high up degrees in literature, English literature. And then she sent me a nice note that brought up other anti-natalists and anti-natalist thinking that she had seen from, BC times with the ancient Greeks that I had never encountered before.
Wow.
So she's pretty interested. And then she apologized and said that at that time, she was so indoctrinated in the Catholic faith that it was hard for her to really think about the consequences of her actions, which was quite lovely.
Yeah.
And how can you really blame your parents or this other stuff? It's a pretty ugly thing to confront your parents with.
Yeah.
Anti-natalist thing. And I went in super gentle because, how about free will and determinism? If you want to do another couple of hours.
Yeah, right. We could definitely do that. Yeah. True.
I mean, can you really, it's not a good thing to do, but can you blame them if nobody said, hey, maybe this is a really bad thing to do? So this is a nice thing about getting the anti-natalist word out, is that for those prospective parents, at least they've heard some of the people say, hey, that's not so great.
Right. Exactly.
And this ability to have some arguments also allows people who are being pressured by their families to have children to have a couple bullet points. I don't think I'm going to have children, Grandma. What? You're not going to have children? You got to have great grandbabies for me. No, I don't have to, and I don't think it's all that great, and I don't think it's a good thing to do. Oh, what? Yeah. And here's some books you could read or pamphlets you could read. Oh, right. What? Turn around. I think that's societal pressure to have children. It's so great. Anti-natalism, maybe a little bit of grist or a little bit of something, a little bit of shielding, a little bit of ability to say, no, I don't, I'm not going to do that. But most of my friends and family are supportive, but I'm such a crusty old lone wolf that, who gives a shit? I have my own ideas, and I have no problem going against the grain. I think this is correct. I'm not going to push it, but if somebody I got a nephew who, went crazy and was fighting me everywhere. Oh yeah, we had endless hours of debates. Wow. Yeah, so fine. Maybe you could beat me if you give a great argument. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all that very detailed answer. I'm in no way trying to make a joke about it, but I don't think you could have possibly got a more polarized response, between your two parents. Wow. That is quite a story, Connor. But what do you think of the anti-natalist community as it exists today?
I think we have a couple of linchpins of the community, of which you're one.
Well, thank you.
And I think building that community is so important because community is going to foster interest and foster thinking and foster the investment of people's time into anti-natalism, whether they're creating Facebook groups or creating YouTube content, whether they're on the Reddit or doing any of that stuff. And I just think it's tremendously important that we get this idea out there like a virus, so it starts to be part of the zeitgeist. So I think these community people are tremendously important. But I also think, unfortunately, some of the people who are attractive to anti-natalism and can hold up to the societal pressure also are, folks who will stay in their houses, hermits and this type of thing, who really don't want to do all the community stuff.
Yeah.
So then you have folks like me, introverts or whatever, who have to interact with the community by making things on their own in their lair.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, kicking stuff out of the layer and occasionally coming out too, coming out of the layer, knocking the horns off their head and, grinding and, chatting with people. So a community's loose and there are some linchpins of the community, and I think there are many, many anti-natalists who are on the fringes. I was an anti-natalist for a long period of time until I started writing Last Call for Heroes, and then doing a bunch of internet research. That's how I discovered there were like-minded thinkers.
Yeah.
But I think the community work is so important and valuable, but that's really, oh my gosh, I just go cringe. I don't want to do that work. I'm so glad you exist. I'll write a book here and there, or do a thing here and there, and do my end. Not everybody in this community has to do things the same way. So I'd like to say, for all you anti-natalists out there, don't be so hard on yourself, and you can do a little thing here and there. Produce a little content. You don't like the way that went, you don't have to upload or anything. A few comments on good YouTube videos for the authors or the YouTube hosts who've done the videos can be tremendously important.
Yes.
You encourage the YouTube providers or whoever is doing the art or thinking that you like. It's tremendously important. There are a lot of ways to support.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And thank you for that, Connor. I really appreciate that. What do you think anti-natalists are doing right so far? And what do you think we're doing wrong at this particular period of time?
We're spreading the word, and that's great. And it'd be nice if we didn't do a bunch of horrible besmirching, but it doesn't even matter if the besmirching happens, or it isn't spread in exactly the right way, because it's the right idea. So spreading this is hugely important. And I think, in my opinion, one of the most important anti-natalists is Raphael Samuel, who threatened to sue his parents.
Yeah.
And holy shit, this could be a title revolution, though I don't think I wrote about this in Last Call for Heroes. So imagine if other people follow suit, pun intended.
I know,
and
yeah.
file lawsuits against their parents. And imagine if somebody wins. So how about a parent who is just a mom who's very, very early in her pregnancy and sees that the son or daughter is going to be without limbs or have some other debilitating condition, and says, well, I want them anyhow. I'll love a child no matter, how that, and then they come out and they say, oh God, this is sure a shit show. And I got enough resources. I'm going to hire a lawyer and sue. And imagine if a child won a lawsuit like that, and how that'd scare prospective parents fucking into oblivion. Or how about it just scares them enough that they check their own genes, right? How about all the parents with horrific genetic disorders who are high odds to pass those on to the children who just don't give a shit, or they have a series of them. We've had 9 children, and they've all died horrific deaths of this known genetic problem that we've had, and we're going for another one. We're going for a 10th, because there's a very small chance the child might have a suitable life. Well, if you open up lawsuits, it's so irresponsible of the parents to do so. If you open up lawsuits and some lawsuits start winning, then maybe the tick of human suffering goes of worldwide human suffering goes just a tick. That scale of human suffering goes just a tick towards a little less suffering, right?
Yeah.
We're bringing in a fewer leukemia or muscular dystrophy or whatever type of horrific known genetic diseases, because people say, well, maybe it's not so good. Maybe it's not so good to produce these people. So I think, in my opinion, what's the community doing right so far? Holy shit, his lawsuit. Mm-hmm. And then if this could inspire some others to do a lawsuit, and oh my God, if eventually in the future somebody wins, great.
Well, there is a history of wrongful life cases, and where he, because he wasn't even, all he really did was threaten to sue his parents.
All he did was threaten.
He didn't even, and it became this global phenomenon with huge consequences. It's really incredible. The whole Raphael Samuel story is incredible. But I've made this point a lot of times that there might be parts of the world that exist where you could win a lawsuit like that. I don't know if there are, but it surprises me that people aren't trying it, to tell you the truth. That I think it could happen at some point. I think somebody, I think he really did set an interesting precedent, for people to at least try it. So, I don't know. But yeah, it is an incredible story, and the influence that he had is just amazing. Yeah.
And what do I think we're doing wrong? Well, I don't think we're doing much wrong as long as we're spreading the word, but you shouldn't be violating people's rights. You shouldn't act outside the pale, right? There's no reason to be ill-mannered or any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's close to home, and it's so important, and it's so immediate, and it's so unseen, but this doesn't really justify, really ill-mannered activities, especially because I don't think they're very successful. So I don't like Danny Shine going in. I love Danny Shine's work for the most part, but I don't like him going into supermarkets and markets and doing some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And you can take it just a little bit beyond where it's even rude. Great. I like his stuff in the public square, but I don't think we should take it quite so far. And I don't think we should be quite so argumentative or this type of thing, but it's not really up to me to say, right? It's not up to me to say what the anti-natalists are doing wrong, or you've taken it a little bit too far. Right. Yeah. And this is interesting because I agree. You said something like anti-natalism is a civil rights movement, perhaps the last civil rights movement. And I agree. And there's a proud history of civil rights. Well, not everybody has to be the Martin Luther King Jr. A few of them can be the Malcolm X. And a lot of people say, oh, in the civil rights movement, which still is occurring today, some of them are looting their own stores. Oh my God, they're doing this shit in their own damn communities. And I say, yeah, shit's gotten pretty damn bad if they have to do it in their own communities. And this is more effective than a peaceful march.
Yeah.
So I don't advocate for any violence, looting, or whatever.
But, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
But who am I to say, oh, these anti-natalists are going way too far? I mean, I'm not going to do it. I don't advocate for it. I don't think it's a good thing. But when the knee's on your neck, which I think it is in some terms for anti-natalists, because they're producing more of us. I wish my parents hadn't created me, and other parents are producing more. So they're just going on. And there's not, so what's acceptable to say? You say, I'm the unborn defender. And then you say, okay, what are the rules for the unborn defender? So we have a superhero called the unborn defender. They're defending the unborn. They'd like to prevent the unborn from being born. What's within the pale for the unborn defender? I don't fucking know. Yeah. I think the default should be not to go crazy, not to violate the law, etc. But where are the lines? This question, what do you think anti-natalists are doing wrong, is such a deep, strong question. I don't feel that I'm qualified to answer it.
No, I think you did, though. I appreciate what you said. So thank you. Yeah. What does the future of antinatalism look like, and why do you feel antinatalism is not futile? I think you said that in one of your interviews, that it's not futile, and I think you got some pushback for that. I'm not sure. Can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah, I've thought about this in the YouTube comments. Our highest, most civilized forum, the YouTube comments.
Yes, absolutely.
We're still growing and still advancing, and you can't predict the future. So I have no freaking idea what the future of antinatalism will look like, even though I wrote a book about, that's just one vision. I am not a prognosticator. I'm not a predictor. I have no idea what the future will look like, but, that's one possibility. And I think antinatalism is not futile, because I think we're already winning pragmatically, even though these people aren't, anti-natalists. It's just the cocktail. A little bit of education for women and access to birth control. Oh, geez, so are the natalists going to say, no, that's way too far? We can't educate women, in a lot of these countries. Right. They kill the women students. They, the first people, we got to kill the teachers. So isn't that horrific? The teachers and engineers, we got to kill those people first. Holy shit, if this stuff ever happened in the U.S., I'd be one of the first to go. So, And even if it is futile, everything else is more futile. This is the one fucking thing that has the highest probability of not being futile. Can somebody tell me something other than anti-natalism that's less futile? So no, anti-natalism is the biggest hope of doing something non-futile, which is why I say, yeah, I'll take a little extra time. I'll write a book. I'll go on a podcast. I'll do a few things. And I'm not doing nearly enough, but like I said, you can't be too hard on yourself. Do a few things. Okay, that that's not too bad. Be great if we could all do more.
Well, Connor, where can people find you, and how can we all help continue to support your work?
I don't want anybody to find me and or interact with me or do anything. My biggest hope is that if you have some interest, buy my book off Amazon, and it'd be nice to get I've got 2 reviews, so like I've said, it's tremendous. I've sold dozens of copies of this book in the last year. So it'd be nice if somebody who's read or purchased the book at Amazon leaves a review. And if you have an interest, buy the book off Amazon and leave a review. And I'd also like to say that if anybody can't afford it or they've got some problem, I priced it out at $10 a pop. If you can't afford it, can't afford shipping or whatever. I didn't mean this to be a barrier of entry. Hit me up on my YouTube channel. I'll send you a copy, cover shipping, and send you a copy for free.
Oh, that's very generous.
I'd like anybody who wants to read the book not to be prohibited by the corresponding price.
Well, have you also thought about maybe doing like a Kindle version or something like that?
Yes. Oh my God, I got such a case of the lazies. I probably need to convert to a Kindle version.
Well, but anyway, that's a very, very generous offer, Connor. That's really awesome of you. Connor, I really do love Last Call for Heroes. I think it is a really important work. And I just really want you to know that I really appreciate you and all the work that you've done. I think you really are a truly talented individual. I think that you've created something truly valuable and wonderful for the antinatalist community and beyond. And it really does deserve a lot more attention and love the work does than it has received so far. So thank you so much again for sharing your talent and work with us all. I can't wait to see what you produce moving forward. I'm so excited about the sequel for Last Call to Heroes, and thank you again also for not only submitting to the contest, but this prize that you're donating. It's a beautiful work of art. And, just thank you so much for being my guest today on the Exploring Antinatalism podcast and for, being so generous with your time. I know this has been a really long interview, but I really, really do appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
You're quite welcome. It's an enormous honor to be on a podcast that David Benatar and other famous anti-natalists have been on. May I make one more closing remark?
Absolutely, please.
In my interview with Dana, the friendly anti-natalist, there are a few really nice things that she did, which she didn't ambush me. She wrote a critique before she ran an interview with me, and so she was totally upfront that she wasn't much of a fan of my book. She was extremely nice to me during the process of that interview, and she never suggested that anyone post negative reviews or ban the book. She encourage people to buy the book, and she's absolutely entitled to her critique. I don't shrink from her critique. I disagreed with some of that on this podcast, but I wish her all the best, and I think she, in general, treated me very nice. So that's just a closing remark I wanted to get in there.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say about the future of your work or about Last Call for Heroes, about anything else that we've talked about today?
No, I think you were quite thorough with me.
I tried. Almost 4 hours worth. So
it's great.
Thank you again, Connor. It's been an absolute joy. It really has. Please buy Last Call for Heroes on Amazon.com. Read Connor's winning entry into the 2020 Why Are You an Anti-natalist Contest, and subscribe to him on YouTube. Links to all this and more below. Thank you for listening to the Exploring Antinatalism Podcast. This has been Amanda Oldphan Sukenick and Mark J. Maharaj. You can find us on the YouTube channels Foreverwolffilms and Question Mark, respectively. Keep up with my daily anti-natalist news updates at Antinatal News on Twitter. Please follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and email us at exploringantinatalism@gmail.com. The podcast can be listened to on the YouTube channel Exploring Antinatalism Podcast, as well as Buzzsprout, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and so many other platforms. Our website, www.exploringantinatalism.com, was designed by the amazing Visions Noirs. Please visit Visions Noirs at www.bionoir.com and find more of his links to more of his work below. Logo art by the incredible Life Sucks. Please visit his YouTube channel and subscribe. And if you would like to perhaps purchase one of the new Exploring Antinatalism t-shirts by Life Sucks, then please visit his Etsy page, www.etsy.com/shop/LifeSucksPublishing. And proudly announcing, our new theme music has been graciously provided by I Doubt It. I Doubt It is an alum of the Exploring Antinatalism podcast, so please go listen to his episode 4, and visit and subscribe to his amazing YouTube channel. All the best, and bye for now.